Dennis Roberts jolts awake, his heart pounding as he finds himself no longer in his familiar apartment, but surrounded by sleek, otherworldly technology. The 28-year-old human male blinks rapidly, trying to process the sudden change in his environment. Before he can gather his thoughts, a tall, slender figure approaches him. "Welcome aboard, Dennis Roberts of Earth," the alien says, her voice melodious yet authoritative. "I am Asha, lead geneticist of the Vorta species." Dennis scrambles to his feet, adrenaline surging through his body. "Where am I? How do you know my name?" Asha's large, almond-shaped eyes study him intently. "You are on our spaceship, far from your home planet. We have been observing Earth for some time, and you, Dennis, have been chosen for a vital mission." The ship's AI chimes in, its disembodied voice echoing through the room. "Genetic scan complete. Subject Dennis Roberts exhibits superior genetic markers and physical attributes, surpassing 99.8% of sampled human population." Asha nods, a hint of excitement in her expression. "As you can see, you are quite special, Dennis. Our race faces extinction due to a severe genetic bottleneck. We've discovered that human DNA, specifically yours, is compatible with ours and could be the key to our survival." Dennis's mind reels as he processes this information. "What exactly are you saying?" "You have been selected as a breeding partner for our females," Asha states matter-of-factly. "Your genetic material will help diversify our gene pool and save our species." Panic sets in as Dennis realizes the implications. "No! This can't be happening. I need to go back to Earth. My family, my job dash." Asha's expression hardens. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Dennis. The alternative to cooperation is death. We cannot risk Earth discovering our presence." The gravity of the situation hits Dennis like a punch to the gut. He's trapped, light years from home, with no hope of return. Asha leads him to a medical bay filled with advanced technology he can barely comprehend. "You will undergo procedures to enhance your fertility and stamina. It's crucial for the success of our program." As Dennis takes in the alien equipment surrounding him, the ship lurches. Through a nearby viewport, he watches Earth shrink to a pale blue before vanishing entirely as the ship enters faster-than-light travel. "You'll never see your home again," Asha says, her tone softening slightly. "But know that your contributions will save an entire species from extinction. You will be revered as a hero among the Vorta." Dennis lies back on the medical table, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, anger, and a growing sense of duty war within him. As the first breeding session approaches, he can't help but feel a twinge of curiosity about Vorta physiology and culture. Asha prepares the medical equipment, her movements precise and efficient. She pauses, meeting Dennis's gaze. "I know this is overwhelming, but you'll adapt. Who knows? You might even come to enjoy your new life among the stars." As the procedure begins, Dennis closes his eyes, steeling himself for whatever comes next. He's no longer just Dennis Roberts from Earth. He's now the potential savior of an alien race, deemed too genetically valuable to kill, but too dangerous to ever return home. The fate of the Vorta now rests in his hands and his genes. As the procedure begins, Dennis closes his eyes, steeling himself for whatever comes next. He's no longer just Dennis Roberts from Earth. He's now the potential savior of an alien race, deemed too genetically valuable to kill, but too dangerous to ever return home. The fate of the Vorta now rests in his hands and his genes. A cool sensation spreads through Dennis's body as Dr. Zira, a blue-skinned Vorta with iridescent eyes, injects him with a carefully formulated cocktail of alien hormones and nanobots. The medical bay hums with activity as the team of alien scientists monitor his vitals on holographic displays. "How are you feeling, Dennis?" Dr. Zira asks, her melodious voice tinged with professional curiosity. Dennis takes a deep breath, acutely aware of every sensation in his body. Strange, he admits. I feel different, more alive, somehow. Dr. Zira nods, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. That's to be expected. The enhancements are already taking effect. Your body is adapting remarkably well. As the procedures continue, Dennis drifts in and out of consciousness. When he fully awakens, he finds himself in a luxurious room that seems to blend comfort with advanced technology. A disembodied voice fills the air, startling him. Greetings, Dennis Roberts. I am Vera, the Vorta Interstellar Reproductive Assistant. I'll be monitoring your physical and mental state throughout your stay with us. Dennis sits up, his head spinning slightly. Vera, are you an AI? Correct, Vera responds. I'm here to ensure your optimal performance and educate you on Vorta physiology, culture, and mating practices. Over the next few hours, Vera floods Dennis with information. He learns about the intricacies of Vorta biology, their complex social structures, and their unique approach to reproduction. Despite his initial resistance, Dennis finds himself fascinated by the alien culture. As he absorbs this knowledge, Dennis becomes increasingly aware of the changes in his own body. His senses seem sharper, his muscles more defined. He catches his reflection in a mirror-like surface and is startled by the subtle alterations to his appearance. A chime at the door interrupts his self-examination. Captain Krell, a stern-faced male Vorta, enters the room. His piercing gaze locks onto Dennis. Mr. Roberts, Krell says, his voice deep and authoritative. I trust you're settling in. I've come to impress upon you the gravity of your situation. Dennis straightens, feeling a mix of intimidation and defiance. I understand I'm here to help save your species. Krell nods sharply. Indeed, but understand this. While you are valuable, you are not irreplaceable. Any attempt to escape or sabotage our mission will be met with severe consequences. Is that clear? Crystal, Dennis replies, his face hard and evening. As Krell leaves, Dennis sinks onto a plush seating arrangement, the weight of his new reality settling over him. He's important, yes, but also a prisoner in a gilded cage. In the following days, Dennis notices the attention he receives from the female Vorta crew members. They find excuses to pass by his quarters, their eyes lingering on him with a mixture of scientific curiosity and unmistakable attraction. One evening, a young technician named Alara fumbles with her datapad as she passes him in a corridor, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of blue. I'm so sorry, she stammers, bending to retrieve the device. Dennis helps her, their hands brushing. Alara's eyes widen, and she hurries away, leaving Dennis with a strange flutter in his chest. These interactions serve as constant reminders of his purpose on the ship. He's not just a guest or a curiosity. He's the key to their survival, a walking repository of genetic material they desperately need. Asha finds Dennis in the ship's arboretum, a vast chamber filled with alien flora that serves as a relaxation area for the crew. Her expression is a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dennis, she says, her voice gentle but firm. It's time. We've scheduled your first breeding session. Dennis's heart races as Asha leads him to a nearby chamber. Inside, he sees a young Vorta female with delicate features and shimmering skin. She looks as nervous as he feels. This is Lyra, Asha introduces. She's been selected for her genetic compatibility with you. Lyra steps forward, her eyes roaming over Dennis with scientific interest and undisguised attraction. It's an honor to meet you, Dennis, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. As Dennis and Lyra enter the mating chamber, Vera's voice fills the room. I will be monitoring your vital signs and providing guidance to ensure optimal results. Please proceed when you're comfortable. The chamber is bathed in soft, mood-enhancing light. The air is infused with subtle pheromones designed to heighten arousal. Dennis feels a heady mix of anxiety, excitement, and a growing sense of duty. As he and Lyra move closer, Dennis realizes that this moment marks more than just a physical encounter. It's the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that will shape the future of an entire alien race. With a deep breath, Dennis reaches out to Lyra, ready to embrace his new role and the unprecedented journey that lies ahead. As Dennis reaches out to Lyra, their hands intertwine, bridging the gap between two worlds. The mating chamber's door slides shut behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them in an environment meticulously designed for their encounter. The room exudes an otherworldly ambience, its walls pulsing with a gentle, bioluminescent glow that mimics the rhythm of a heartbeat. A large, ergonomically designed bed dominates the center, its surface shimmering with an alien fabric that seems to respond to touch. Along the walls, sleek monitoring devices hum quietly, their displays flickering with a constant stream of data. Vera's voice fills the air, soothing yet clinical. Welcome, Dennis and Lyra. I will guide you through this process to ensure optimal conditions for conception. Please proceed at your own pace. Dennis takes a deep breath, acutely aware of Lyra's presence beside him. Her skin emits a faint, ethereal luminescence that intensifies as she meets his gaze. The air between them crackles with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. I'm not entirely sure how to begin, Dennis admits, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's lips curve into a gentle smile. Perhaps we could start by getting to know each other a little better, she suggests, her melodious voice tinged with a hint of shyness. They sit on the edge of the bed, its surface molding to their forms with surprising comfort. As they talk, Dennis finds himself captivated by Lyra's grace and intelligence. Her iridescent eyes shimmer with curiosity as she asks about Earth and human culture. Gradually, the initial awkwardness fades. Dennis, drawing on his human experiences, initiates physical contact by gently brushing a strand of Lyra's silvery hair from her face. She leans into his touch, her skin warm against his fingers. Your temperature, Dennis murmurs, surprised. It's much higher than I expected. Lyra nods, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of blue. Yes, Vorta body temperature is naturally higher than humans. Does it bother you? Dennis shakes his head, finding the warmth oddly comforting. As they move closer, he becomes acutely aware of the differences in Vorta physiology. Lyra's muscles possess an unusual elasticity, allowing for graceful, fluid movements that seem almost impossible by human standards. Their first kiss is tentative, exploratory. Dennis marvels at the alien yet pleasing sensation of Lyra's lips against his. As their passion grows, Lyra's bioluminescence intensifies, bathing them both in a soft, pulsating glow. Vera's voice interrupts, startling them both. Excellent progress. Your vital signs indicate increased compatibility. Please proceed to the next stage of physical intimacy. Dennis and Lyra exchange a look, half amused, half embarrassed by the AI's clinical interjection. But as they continue, the outside world fades away, leaving only the two of them in their shared moment of connection. Hours pass, though time seems to lose meaning in the enclosed chamber. Vera occasionally provides guidance, suggesting position changes or breaks to optimize their chances of conception. Despite the clinical nature of their encounter, Dennis finds himself forming an unexpected bond with Lyra. Their shared vulnerability in this alien situation creates a connection that transcends their biological differences. As their session concludes, Dennis feels a complex mix of emotions, exhaustion, exhilaration, and a twinge of guilt that surprises him. Lyra rests her head on his chest, her luminescence dimming as she catches her breath. The chamber's door slides open, admitting Dr. Zira and her medical team. They move with practiced efficiency, collecting genetic samples and performing quick examinations on both Dennis and Lyra. Dr. Zira's eyes gleam with barely suppressed excitement as she reviews the initial data. Preliminary results are very promising, she announces. We'll need time for a full analysis, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the possibility of successful fertilization. As the medical team bustles around them, Dennis and Lyra exchange a final, lingering look. There's an unspoken acknowledgement between them. Whatever the outcome, they've shared something profound and unique. Dennis is escorted back to his quarters, his body aching in unfamiliar ways. Vera's voice follows him, explaining the need for rest and recuperation. Your body requires time to recover and prepare for future sessions, the AI informs him. I'll be monitoring your vital signs to determine when you'll be ready for your next encounter. Alone in his room, Dennis sinks onto his bed, his legs shaking from the experience. He stares out the viewport at the unfamiliar stars streaking by, grappling with conflicting emotions. There's a sense of accomplishment, knowing he's potentially helped save an alien species. But it's tinged with guilt over the circumstances of his involvement and a lingering homesickness for Earth. His contemplation is interrupted by a chime at the door. Asha enters, her face a mask of professional composure, but Dennis detects a hint of excitement in her eyes. "Dennis," she begins, taking a seat across from him, "I wanted to personally debrief you on today's session. The initial results are more promising than we dared hope. While it's too early to confirm conception, the genetic compatibility between you and Lyra exceeded our projections." Dennis nods, still processing the information. "What happens now?" he asks. Asha's expression softens slightly. "Now you rest. Your cooperation and performance have not gone unnoticed. The ship's council is pleased and has agreed to grant you certain privileges as a reward." Before Dennis can inquire further, the door chimes again. To his surprise, Captain Krell enters, his imposing figure filling the doorway. The captain's usual stern demeanor seems somewhat softened as he regards Dennis. "Mr. Roberts," Krell begins, his deep voice resonating in the small room, "I must admit, I was initially skeptical about using a human in our breeding program. However, after witnessing the potential success of your first session, I'm beginning to see you in a new light." Krell produces a small device from his pocket, handing it to Dennis. "This will grant you limited access to our ship's database. Consider it a gesture of growing trust." As Krell and Asha leave, Dennis examines the device in his hand. It's a tangible symbol of his changing status aboard the ship, a turning point in his alien journey. Curiosity overtakes exhaustion as Dennis activates the device. He delves into the Vorta database, hungry for knowledge about the race he's now inextricably linked to. He learns of their once vast civilization spanning multiple star systems and the centuries of decline that have led to their current desperate situation. As he absorbs this information, a notification from Vera appears on the device's screen. His next mating session has been scheduled, this time with a different partner. Dennis takes a deep breath, realizing that his life has irrevocably changed. He's no longer just Dennis Roberts from Earth, but a vital component in an alien species' fight for survival. With this newfound knowledge and purpose, Dennis begins to prepare himself mentally and physically for the challenges that lie ahead. The stars outside his viewport seem to shine a little brighter, a silent testament to the uncharted journey he's embarking upon. As Dennis delved deeper into the Vorta database, the enormity of his role began to sink in. The fate of an entire species now rested, quite literally, in his hands. His contemplation was interrupted by a gentle chime from the device, signaling the start of his new regimen. The following weeks blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Dennis found himself shuttled from one mating chamber to another, each session meticulously monitored and optimized by Vera and Dr. Zira's team. The frequency and intensity of these encounters left him in a near-constant state of exhaustion. "Your body is adapting remarkably well, Dennis," Dr. Zira commented during one of their daily examinations. She adjusted a device on his arm, its cool metal pressing against his skin. We've made some additional enhancements to improve your stamina and recovery time. Dennis nodded, too tired to speak. He felt a slight tingling sensation as the device released its contents into his bloodstream. Within moments, a surge of energy coursed through him, temporarily masking his fatigue. As days turned into weeks, Dennis noticed a shift in the ship's atmosphere. Vorta crew members began to regard him with a mix of awe and reverence. Whispers followed him through the corridors, and he often caught glimpses of wide-eyed faces peering at him from around corners. One evening, as Dennis returned to his quarters, he found a young Vorta technician attempting to bypass his door security protocols. The technician froze, her face flushing a deep blue. I just wanted to meet you," she stammered before security officers whisked her away. Following this incident, Captain Krell implemented stricter security measures. "Your safety is paramount, Mr. Roberts," Krell explained, his tone a mixture of concern and possessiveness. "We cannot risk any unauthorized interactions." The intensity of the breeding program continued to escalate. Dennis found himself in sessions with multiple partners, the mating chambers now designed to accommodate group encounters. Vera's voice guided these complex interactions, her clinical instructions a stark contrast to the intimacy of the act. "Participant A, please adjust your position by 15 degrees. Participant B, increase pheromone output by 20%, Dennis. Your heart rate is elevating beyond optimal levels. Please focus on regulating your breathing." As the physical demands grew, so did the emotional toll. Dennis struggled to maintain a sense of self amidst the clinical nature of these encounters. The faces of his partners began to blur together, each session feeling more impersonal than the last. Asha became a constant presence during this time, her visits ostensibly to monitor his well-being. Their conversations, however, often strayed beyond the professional. "Tell me about Earth," she asked one evening, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What do you miss most?" Dennis paused, considering. "The unpredictability," he finally answered. "The chaos of everyday life. Here, everything is so controlled." Asha nodded, her hand briefly touching his. The contact sent a jolt through Dennis, different from the physical sensations he'd grown accustomed to in the mating chambers. There was a warmth, a connection that he hadn't realized he'd been craving. Their moment was interrupted by Vera's voice. "Dennis, your next session is scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. Please proceed to mating chamber 3. As Dennis stood to leave, Asha's expression flickered with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Disappointment? Longing? Before he could analyze it further, he was whisked away to his next appointment. Weeks into the program, Dr. Zira burst into Dennis's quarters, her face alight with excitement. "We've done it!" she exclaimed. "We've confirmed the first successful human Vorta conception." The news spread through the ship like wildfire. Celebrations erupted among the crew, the corridors filled with joyous chatter and laughter. Dennis, however, felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride at his accomplishment warred with a deep-seated unease at the reality of what he'd created. As the implications of the success sank in, new challenges arose. Whispers of concern began to circulate among some crew members about the long-term effects of introducing human DNA into the Vorta gene pool. Are we not altering the very essence of what it means to be Vorta? Dennis overheard one officer argue in the mess hall. "Our survival is at stake," another countered. "We must adapt or perish." These debates reached the ship's council, leading to heated discussions that Dennis was not privy to. The outcome, however, soon became clear. Captain Krell summoned Dennis to the bridge, his imposing figure silhouetted against a vast expanse of space visible through the view screen. "Mr. Roberts," Krell began, his tone grave, "in light of recent developments, we've decided to alter our course. Instead of returning to our homeworld, we'll be heading to a remote colony planet. Your work will continue there, away from potential. Interference. The implications of this decision hit Dennis like a physical blow. Any hope he'd harbored of eventually returning to Earth vanished in an instant. His new reality stretched out before him, years of continued breeding on an alien world. As Dennis grappled with this revelation, he found an unexpected ally in Lyra, his first Vorta partner. She began to speak out on his behalf to the ship's leadership, advocating for better treatment and more personal freedom. He's more than just a breeding tool, Dennis overheard Lyra arguing with a council member. He's an individual with needs and rights of his own. Her words sparked a subtle shift in how some Vorta viewed Dennis. Slowly, he began to notice small acts of kindness and recognition from crew members, a nod of respect here, a word of gratitude there. As the ship hurtled through space towards its new destination, Dennis stood at the viewport in his quarters, watching unfamiliar stars streak by. He placed a hand on the cool surface, feeling the thrum of the engines beneath his palm. His reflection stared back at him. The same face, yet somehow fundamentally changed. He was no longer just Dennis Roberts from Earth. He had become something more, a bridge between two species, a key to the survival of an alien race. As the weight of this responsibility settled over him, Dennis took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges that lay ahead on the distant colony world. The door chimed, signaling his next session. With one last look at the stars, Dennis turned away from the viewport, ready to face whatever the future held for him. As the door slid open, Dennis took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, ready to face his next session. The following weeks blurred into a relentless cycle of mating chambers, medical examinations, and brief periods of rest. As the Vorta ship approached its destination, Dennis noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The crew's excitement was palpable, their anticipation growing with each passing day. Captain Krell's voice boomed over the ship's intercom, announcing their imminent arrival at the colony world. "We stand on the brink of a new era for our people," he declared, his words filled with a mixture of pride and willpower. The moment they entered orbit, Dennis's schedule intensified. Dr. Zira and her team implemented a new rotation system, introducing him to carefully selected groups of Vorta females each day. The mating chambers became a revolving door of faces and bodies, each encounter meticulously monitored and optimized by Vera. "Your genetic compatibility with Subject 47 is optimal." Vera's voice guided him through one session. "Please adjust your position to maximize potential conception." Dennis complied, his body moving almost mechanically. The clinical nature of these encounters had become second nature to him, yet a part of him still yearned for a deeper connection. Between sessions, Dr. Zira subjected Dennis to a barrage of new treatments. He felt the cool press of hypo sprays against his skin, followed by waves of dizziness and surges of energy. "These enhancements will increase your sperm production and motility," Dr. Zira explained, her eyes gleaming with scientific fervor. "We're pushing the boundaries of human physiology, Dennis. You're making history." The constant medical interventions took their toll. Dennis found himself plagued by bouts of fatigue and disorientation. During one particularly intense episode, he stumbled in the corridor, only to be caught by a pair of strong arms. "Careful there, Mr. Roberts," a deep voice rumbled. Dennis looked up to see one of his newly assigned guards, a towering Vorta with piercing silver eyes. The increased security was just one of many changes Dennis noticed. Everywhere he went, he felt the weight of reverent gazes following him. Vorta crew members bowed their heads as he passed, some even reaching out to touch him as if he were a holy relic. Asha appeared at his side more frequently, guiding him through the complex web of social and political dynamics that had sprung up around him. Her presence became a source of comfort in the increasingly chaotic environment. "The crew sees you as a savior," Asha explained during one of their conversations. "You're giving them hope for a future they thought was lost." Dennis nodded, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Asha?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Asha's eyes met his, a flicker of emotion passing through them. Before she could respond, the ship shuddered, signaling their entry into the colony world's atmosphere. The descent was smooth, and soon Dennis found himself stepping onto the surface of an alien world. The air was thick and humid, filled with the scent of unfamiliar vegetation. In the distance, he could see the gleaming spires of Vorta settlements rising above the lush landscape. A group of colony officials greeted them, leading Dennis and his entourage to a massive facility that dominated the skyline. As they approached, Dennis realized the structure would be his new home, a gilded cage designed to house him and support the breeding program. Inside, the facility hummed with activity. Scientists in crisp uniforms bustled about, their arms laden with data pads and medical equipment. Dennis was whisked away to his new living quarters, a spacious suite that felt more like a luxury apartment than a holding cell. As he settled in, Dr. Zira entered, her face alight with excitement. "Dennis, I have incredible news," she announced. "The first batch of human Vorta hybrid embryos has been successfully gestated. The infants have just been born." Dennis felt a surge of emotions, pride, fear, and a strange sense of loss. He had helped create new life, yet he would never know these children as his own. Can I see them?" he asked hesitantly. Dr. Zira nodded, leading him to a nearby nursery. Through a large viewing window, Dennis saw rows of incubators, each containing a tiny, blue-tinged infant. His breath caught in his throat as he noticed the subtle human characteristics, the shape of an ear, the curve of a nose. "They're beautiful," he whispered, placing his hand against the cool glass. As Dennis stood there, transfixed by the sight of these new lives, he felt a familiar presence beside him. Lyra had arrived, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and concern as she gazed at the hybrid infants. "What have we done, Dennis?" she asked softly. "What does this mean for our future?" Before he could respond, Captain Krell's voice echoed through the facility, announcing the start of a new phase in the breeding program. Dennis turned away from the nursery window, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The weight of his role pressed down upon him, heavier than ever before. As he walked back to his quarters, flanked by his ever-present guards, Dennis caught sight of his reflection in a polished wall panel. The face that stared back at him was both familiar and strange. The same features, yet transformed by the weight of his experiences and the magnitude of his responsibility. He was no longer just Dennis Roberts from Earth. He had become something more, a bridge between species, a key to survival, a source of hope for an entire civilization. As he prepared himself for the next phase of this extraordinary journey, Dennis couldn't help but wonder what further changes awaited him on this alien world. As Dennis contemplated the changes ahead, he couldn't have imagined the storm brewing on the horizon. The days blurred into weeks as the breeding program expanded rapidly. Dennis found himself in a constant cycle of mating sessions, medical examinations, and brief periods of rest. The facility hummed with activity, scientists and support staff working tirelessly to support the ambitious project. One morning, as Dennis walked through the corridors flanked by his guards, he overheard hushed whispers that made him pause. Dr. Nara's team. Unauthorized experiments. Cloning. The words sent a chill down his spine. Before he could process their meaning, Asha appeared, her face tight with concern. "Dennis, we need to talk," she said, guiding him to a private room. Once inside, Asha revealed the shocking truth. A group of rogue scientists led by Dr. Nara has been secretly experimenting with your DNA to create clones. They aim to produce multiple versions of you to accelerate the breeding process. Dennis felt the blood drain from his face. "Clones? Of me?" Asha nodded grimly. "Captain Krell just discovered the project. It's caused a massive uproar among the colony's leadership. The news spread like wildfire, dividing the colony into factions. Dennis found himself at the center of a fierce debate. Some Vorta argued that cloning was a logical step to ensure their species' survival, while others, including Asha, vehemently opposed it on ethical grounds. Amidst this controversy, Dr. Zira approached Dennis with another startling development. The first generation of human Vorta hybrids is showing signs of rapid development, she explained, leading him to a secure observation room. Through a one-way mirror, Dennis watched in awe as children who should have been infants moved and behaved like toddlers. One hybrid child, no more than a few weeks old, was already attempting to speak. They're maturing at an accelerated rate, Dr. Zira said, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. We're still studying the implications, but this could change everything. As Dennis grappled with these revelations, he noticed increased security measures throughout the facility. Captain Krell's voice came over the intercom, announcing new protocols in restricted areas. During one of his rest periods, Dennis was introduced to Tila, a striking Vorta female with piercing eyes and an air of quiet strength. "Mr. Roberts, I'm Tila," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "I've been assigned as your personal bodyguard. I'll be with you at all times from now on." Dennis nodded, wondering about the need for such intense protection. He soon found out why. Alarms blared through the facility, red lights flashing in every corridor. Captain Krell's voice boomed over the speakers, ordering an immediate lockdown. "All personnel, return to your designated safe zones. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Tila grabbed Dennis's arm, her eyes scanning for threats. "We need to move now," she said, guiding him swiftly through the chaos. As they hurried to a secure area, Dennis caught snippets of frantic conversations. Intruders, Krell-Thax agents, sabotage. Tila ushered Dennis into a reinforced room where they found Asha, Lyra, and several other key figures already waiting. The heavy doors sealed behind them with a resounding thud. "What's happening?" Dennis demanded, looking from face to face. Captain Krell's hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. "We've detected Krell-Thax infiltrators," he explained, his usually stoic face creased with worry. "They're after you, Dennis, and the breeding program. We're working to neutralize the threat, but for now, you all need to stay here where it's safe." As the implications of this new danger sank in, Dennis felt a surge of frustration and anger. He turned to Asha and Captain Krell's hologram, his voice rising. "Enough! I deserve answers," he demanded. "Cloning experiments, accelerated hybrid growth, alien infiltrators? I'm tired of being kept in the dark about decisions that directly affect me." The room fell silent, all eyes on Dennis. It was a turning point, the moment he began to assert himself not just as a valuable resource, but as a sentient being with rights and opinions. Captain Krell's hologram flickered, his expression unreadable. "You're right, Dennis. You deserve to be involved in these discussions. Once this immediate threat is neutralized, we'll convene a full council meeting. You'll have a seat at the table." As Dennis nodded, accepting this concession, the facility shook with a distant explosion. Tila moved closer to Dennis, her hand on her weapon. "They've breached the outer defenses," Captain Krell announced, his voice grim. "Prepare yourselves. This may be a long night." The room's occupants exchanged nervous glances. Dennis felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He was no longer just a breeder, a genetic key to the Vorta survival. He was now at the center of a conflict that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As another explosion rocked the facility, Dennis steeled himself for what was to come. The breeding program, the ethical debates, the political maneuvering, all of it paled in comparison to the immediate threat. He looked around at the faces of those he had come to know, Asha, Lyra, Tila, even the hologram of Captain Krell, and realized that their fates were now intertwined in ways he could never have imagined. The alarms continued to blare, a constant reminder of the danger lurking beyond their secure room. As they waited for news of the Krellthax's advance, Dennis couldn't help but wonder, how had his role as a savior for one species made him a target for another? And more importantly, how would he navigate the complex web of loyalties, ethics, and interstellar politics that now surrounded him? The answer to these questions would have to wait. For now, survival was the only thing that mattered. Dennis took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever challenges the night would bring. The future of human-Vorta relations, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. The future of human-Vorta relations, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. But there was no time to ponder these weighty implications as the facility rocked with another explosion. Closer this time. Captain Krell's hologram flickered and stabilized. "The Krellthax have breached the outer defenses," he reported, his voice tight with tension. "They're advancing rapidly towards the central breeding facility." Dennis felt his heart race as the reality of the situation sank in. The distant sounds of weapons fire and shouting grew louder, punctuated by the facility's blaring alarms. Tila's demeanor shifted instantly. Her posture straightened, eyes sharpening as she scanned the room. "Everyone stay calm," she commanded, her voice carrying a newfound authority. "I'm initiating emergency protocol Omega-7. Asha's eyes widened in recognition. Omega-7? But that means... Yes, Tila confirmed, her gaze locking with Dennis's. "I'm not just a bodyguard. I'm a covert operative from the Vorta Special Forces, embedded to protect Dennis at all costs." Before Dennis could process this revelation, the room's security feed lit up, showing scenes of chaos throughout the facility. His breath caught as he saw familiar faces on the screen, the hybrid children he had observed earlier, now moving with startling speed and agility. "The hybrids," Dr. Zira gasped, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "They're fighting?" Indeed, the human-Vorta hybrids, their growth accelerated beyond anyone's expectations, were actively assisting in the facility's defense. Their enhanced strength and reflexes were evident as they moved heavy equipment to barricade doors, and even engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the invading Krellthax forces. Dennis watched, a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. Pride at the capabilities of these beings he had helped create warred with horror at seeing them thrust into violent conflict at such a young age. A proximity alarm blared, cutting through Dennis's thoughts. Tila's hand flew to her weapon. "They're close. We need to move. Now." As the group prepared to leave their shelter, the facility shook with another explosion, this one much closer. The lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness, the door to their secure room hissed open. Dennis's heart leapt to his throat, expecting to see Krellthax soldiers pouring in. Instead, a familiar face appeared. Dr. Nara, her lab coat singed and her eyes wild with a mix of fear and excitement. "Quick," she panted. "Follow me. We have a way out." Tila's weapon snapped up, training on Dr. Nara. "Explain yourself," she demanded. Dr. Nara's words tumbled out in a rush. "The cloning project. It was more successful than we anticipated. We have viable Dennis clones, at various stages of development. They're our best chance at preserving the breeding program if the worst happens." A chill ran down Dennis's spine at the thought of multiple versions of himself existing. Before he could voice his shock or objections, Captain Krell's hologram sparked to life again. "We don't have time for debate," he stated firmly. "Dr. Nara, lead them to the cloning lab. Tila, ensure Dennis's safety at all costs. I'm activating our last resort, Project Leapfrog." Asha gasped, "The experimental teleportation device? But it's never been tested on humans." "We're out of options," Krell replied grimly. "Get to the device. We'll attempt to transport Dennis and key personnel to our backup facility on the far side of the planet." As they raced through the corridors, following Dr. Nara's lead, Dennis's mind reeled. clones, teleportation. It all seemed too fantastical, even after everything he'd experienced. Yet the sounds of battle drawing ever closer grounded him in the harsh reality of their situation. They burst into the cloning lab, and Dennis froze. There, in various stages of development, were multiple versions of himself. Some were little more than embryos, while others appeared to be fully grown adults. One, in particular, caught his eye, a clone that looked exactly like him, staring back with an unsettling mixture of recognition and detachment. Before anyone could react, alarms blared once more. Dr. Zira, who had been monitoring the facility's systems, cried out, "Krellfax forces have breached the inner sanctum. They're heading straight for us." Tila sprang into action, barking orders to fortify their position. The hybrid children who had followed them to the lab immediately began moving equipment to create makeshift barricades. As Dennis helped with the preparations, he couldn't shake the feeling of unreality. Here he was, surrounded by versions of himself, working alongside the products of his DNA to defend against an alien invasion. It was like something out of a fever dream. Suddenly, the lab's reinforced doors buckled under a tremendous impact. Tila pushed Dennis behind a console as the doors finally gave way, revealing a squad of Krellfax soldiers led by an imposing figure, Commander Zax. "Surrender the human and all genetic material," Zax demanded, his voice cold and metallic. Tila's response came in the form of weapons fire, signaling the start of a fierce battle within the confined space of the lab. Dennis found himself ducking behind equipment, the sounds of energy weapons and shattering glass filling the air. In the chaos, Dennis's gaze met that of his fully grown clone. There was a moment of unspoken communication, a shared understanding of the unprecedented situation they found themselves in. Then, without warning, the clone made a break for the far side of the lab, where a large, circular platform hummed with energy, the teleportation device. "Stop him!" Tila yelled, but she was pinned down by Krellfax fire. Dennis made a split-second decision. He couldn't let his clone potentially take his place. Ignoring Tila's shouts, he sprinted after his doppelganger. As he reached the teleportation platform, Dennis grappled with his clone. It was a surreal experience, fighting against a mirror image of himself. They struggled, evenly matched, as the battle raged around them. Asha and Lyra rushed to the platform, trying to separate the two Denises. In the confusion, Dr. Zira appeared, clutching a data pad. "The long-term hybridization data," she panted. "We can't lose it." The teleportation device hummed louder, energy building around them. Captain Krell's voice came over the comms, strained and urgent. "Initiating teleport sequence now. Brace yourselves." Dennis looked up to see Commander Zax breaking through the last of their defenses, his cold eyes fixed on the platform. Tila and the hybrid children were falling back, forming a last line of defense. As the energy of the teleportation device reached its peak, Dennis realized the enormity of the moment. He was about to be thrown into yet another unknown, with the fate of multiple species potentially resting on the outcome. The world around them began to shimmer and distort. Dennis felt a tugging sensation, as if his very atoms were being pulled apart. The last thing he saw before the lab disappeared in a flash of blinding light was Commander Zax lunging towards a platform, his outstretched hand inches from Dennis's face. Then, everything went white. White. The world around Dennis dissolved into a blinding, searing light that seemed to penetrate every cell of his body. He felt as if he were being torn apart and reassembled simultaneously. His consciousness stretched across an infinite expanse before snapping back into focus. With a disorienting lurch, Dennis found himself sprawled on a cold metal floor. The acrid smell of ozone filled his nostrils as he gasped for breath, his stomach churning violently. Blinking rapidly to clear his vision, he became aware of others around him, groaning and stirring. "Status report." Tila's voice cut through the confusion. already on her feet and assessing their new surroundings. Dennis pushed himself up, fighting waves of nausea. The room they had materialized in was a stark contrast to the facility they had just left. Gone were the sleek, advanced laboratories. Instead, they found themselves in a cramped, utilitarian space with low ceilings and bare metal walls. Dim emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie, reddish glow. As his eyes adjusted, Dennis realized with a jolt that he was staring at himself. His clone lay just a few feet away, an exact mirror image down to the last detail. Their eyes met, a moment of mutual recognition and bewilderment passing between them. "Everyone accounted for?" Asha called out, her voice strained as she helped Lyra to her feet. Dr. Zira was already moving among the group, her medical scanner whirring. "The hybrid seemed to have weathered the transport well," she reported, pausing as she reached Dennis and his clone. "But you too. Your readings are concerning." Dennis tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness sent him staggering. His clone fared no better, collapsing back to the floor with a groan. Dr. Zira's face creased with worry as she studied her scanner. "The teleportation process has significantly stressed your systems," she explained. "We need to monitor you both closely. There could be implications for the breeding program." Before Dennis could process this, a holographic image of Captain Krell flickered to life in the center of the room. His usually composed demeanor was gone, replaced by an expression of steadfast perseverance. "You've made it to the backup facility," he said without preamble. "The main colony is under full assault by Krellthax forces. This bunker is our last line of defense. You must continue the breeding program at all costs. The fate of the Vorta now rests entirely in your hands." The hologram winked out, leaving the group in stunned silence. Dennis looked around at the faces of his companions, Asha, Lyra, Tila, Dr. Zira, and the hybrid children who had made it through with them. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. Tila was the first to snap into action. "We need to secure this facility," she barked, her training taking over. "Hybrids with me. We'll set up defensive perimeters and run a full sweep for any vulnerabilities." As Tila led the older hybrids away, Dennis was struck by how much they had matured. Some now appeared fully grown, their movements graceful and purposeful. He wondered at the accelerated pace of their development, a pang of something like paternal pride mixing with his unease. Dr. Zira turned to Dennis and his clone, her expression serious. "We need to begin a new, intensified breeding schedule immediately," she said. "The teleportation may have affected your fertility. We can't waste any time." Dennis's clone spoke up for the first time, his voice an uncanny echo of Dennis's own. "And what about me? Am I to be included in this program, or am I just a spare part?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Dennis looked at his doppelganger, a complex mix of emotions churning inside him. The ethical implications of the clone's existence, let alone his potential role in the breeding program, were staggering. Asha stepped forward, her practical nature asserting itself. "We need to inventory our resources and set up a sustainable system," she said. "This facility clearly wasn't meant for long-term habitation." As the group dispersed to their tasks, Dennis found himself alone with Lyra. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him in the midst of the chaos. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. Dennis opened his mouth to respond, but found he had no words. How could he possibly articulate the maelstrom of thoughts and feelings swirling within him? The pressure of being the linchpin in the survival of an entire species, the physical toll of the breeding program, the existential crisis of facing his own clone, it all threatened to overwhelm him. Before he could formulate a response, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Tila's voice crackled over the intercom system. "Perimeter alert. We've detected Krellthax energy signatures on the planet's surface. They're searching for us." Dennis and Lyra exchanged a look of dread. The moments of respite had been fleeting. Once again, they found themselves on the knife's edge of survival, with the future of the Vorta hanging in the balance. As the facility erupted into frantic activity around them, Dennis steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The breeding program, the presence of his clone, the looming threat of the Krellfax, all of it would have to be faced head-on. With a deep breath, he pushed aside his fatigue and disorientation, ready to step into whatever role was required of him. The backup facility, their last bastion of hope, hummed with tension as its occupants prepared for the trials to come. Outside, somewhere on the planet's surface, their enemies drew ever closer. Time, it seemed, was no longer on their side. The realization of their precarious situation hung heavy in the air, but there was no time for despair. Dennis, his mind racing, turned to the group with a sudden spark of grit in his eyes. "We can't just wait here to be found," he said, his voice low but firm. "I have an idea." All eyes turned to him, a mix of hope and apprehension on their faces. "My clone and I," Dennis continued, gesturing to his doppelganger, "we can act as decoys. Lead the Krellfax away from here, while the rest of you escape to another location." A tense silence followed his words. Tila was the first to speak, her tactical mind already assessing the plan. "It's risky, but it could work. We'd need a small team to make it convincing." "I'll go with them," she added, her hand resting on her weapon. Two of the older hybrids, their features a perfect blend of human and Vorta, stepped forward. "We'll join as well," one of them said, his voice deeper than Dennis expected. "Our enhanced abilities could prove useful." Dr. Zira frowned, her medical scanner whirring, as she studied Dennis and his clone. "Your bodies are still recovering from the teleportation. This could put significant strain on you both." Dennis shared a look with his clone, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "We don't have a choice," the clone said, echoing Dennis's thoughts. Asha approached Dennis, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure about this?" He nodded, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "It's our best chance to protect the breeding program and the younger hybrids." As the group quickly prepared for their respective missions, Dennis found himself alone with his clone for a moment. The similarity between them was still jarring, like looking into a living mirror. "Ready to save the world?" Dennis asked, attempting a weak smile. His clone's expression remained serious. "Ready to try, at least." Within minutes, two groups had formed. Dennis, his clone Tila, and the two hybrid adults prepared to leave through a hidden exit, while Asha, Lyra, Dr. Zira, and the remaining hybrids gathered supplies for their covert journey to the secondary facility. As Dennis's team stepped out into the alien landscape, the reality of their situation hit him full force. The sky was a deep purple, twin moons hanging low on the horizon. Strange, bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow across the rocky terrain. Tila took point, her keen eyes scanning for any sign of Krellfax activity. "Remember," she whispered, "our goal is to be seen but not caught. We need to lead them on a wild chase." They moved swiftly, deliberately leaving signs of their passage. Broken branches, disturbed soil, anything to create an obvious trail. The two hybrid adults, whom Dennis learned were named Kai and Nira, moved with an almost preternatural grace, their enhanced senses alert for any danger. As they crested a hill, Dennis caught sight of a Krellfax scouting party in the distance, their metallic armor glinting in the moonlight. His heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Now," Tila whispered. Dennis and his clone stepped into view for just a moment before ducking back behind cover. It was enough. A sharp cry went up from the Krellfax group, followed by the sound of rapid movement. "It worked," Dennis's clone said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "They've taken the bait." And so began a dangerous game of cat and mouse across the alien terrain. Dennis and his team stayed just ahead of their pursuers, leading them further and further from the hidden bunker. They navigated treacherous ravines, dense forests of alien vegetation, and fields of sharp, crystalline formations that threatened to shred their clothing and skin. At one point, they found themselves cornered at the edge of a steep cliff, the sounds of Krelthak's soldiers closing in from behind. Dennis felt a moment of panic, but Kai and Nira stepped forward, their eyes gleaming with an almost predatory light. "We'll handle this," Kai said, his voice barely above a whisper. What followed was a display of stealth and cunning that left Dennis in awe. The two hybrids used a combination of Vorta technology and what could only be described as enhanced human ingenuity to create false trails and misleading sounds. They moved with such speed and silence that even Tila seemed impressed. As they continued their evasion, Dennis found himself working in closer coordination with his clone. Despite their identical appearance, he began to notice subtle differences in how they approach problems. Where Dennis might rely on intuition, his clone often took a more analytical approach. On the third day of their mission, as they paused to catch their breath in the shadow of a massive, mushroom-like growth, Dennis turned to his genetic duplicate. "You know," he said, panting slightly, "I never asked. Do you have a name?" The clone looked at him, an unreadable expression on his face. "I hadn't considered it," he admitted. "I suppose I've just been thinking of myself as Dennis as well." Before they could discuss it further, Tila signaled for silence. In the distance, barely visible through the strange foliage, was the outline of a structure. As they cautiously approached, Dennis realized it was an abandoned Vorta outpost, its sleek architecture a stark contrast to the wild landscape around it. "We might find something useful inside," Tila said, her voice low. "But be careful. It could be a trap." They entered the outpost, weapons at the ready. The interior was dark and silent, dust covering every surface. As they explored, Dennis's clone discovered a room filled with communication equipment. "Look at this," he called out, his fingers dancing over a control panel. Suddenly, the room hummed to life, holographic displays flickering into existence. Tila's eyes widened as she recognized what they were seeing. "Krelthak's transmissions," she breathed. "We're intercepting their communications." As they decoded the messages, a chill ran down Dennis's spine. The Krelthak's invasion force was far larger than they had initially believed, with reinforcements already on their way. The urgency of their mission suddenly increased tenfold. "We need to warn the others," Dennis said, looking at his team. "But how can we do that without leading the Krelthak straight to them?" His clone stepped forward, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I might have an idea," he said, "but it's going to be risky." As Dennis listened to his doppelganger's plan, he felt a mix of admiration and trepidation. The fate of the breeding program, the hybrid children, and possibly the entire Vorta species now hung in the balance. Whatever they decided to do next would have far-reaching consequences. Outside the abandoned outpost, the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Somewhere out there, the Krelthaks were closing in, and beyond them, in a hidden secondary facility, Asha, Lyra, and the others waited, unaware of the greater danger heading their way. Dennis looked at his clone, then at Tila and the hybrid adults. They were a small team, facing impossible odds. But as he met each of their gazes, he saw the same purpose reflected back at him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "All right," Dennis said, taking a deep breath. "Let's hear this plan of yours." "Yours?" Dennis nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities and risks of his clone's plan. "We need to split up," Dennis said, his voice firm with drive. "Our clone team will warn the others at the secondary facility about the Krelthak's threat. Meanwhile, we'll continue our decoy mission." Tila's eyes narrowed. "That's incredibly risky. We're already stretched thin." "Exactly why it's our best option," Dennis's clone countered. "The Krelthaks won't expect us to divide our forces." After a brief but intense discussion, they settled on the details. Dennis's clone would take Kai, while Dennis, Tila, and Nero would persist with their diversionary tactics. As they prepared to part ways, Dennis found himself face to face with his genetic duplicate. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions and shared purpose. "Take care of yourself," Dennis said, clapping his clone on the shoulder. His doppelganger nodded. "You too. Try not to get killed before I can steal your identity." The joke, unexpected and dry, broke the tension. They shared a brief, wry smile before the clone, and Kai slipped into the alien night. Dennis watched them disappear into the strange, bioluminescent foliage before turning back to Tila and Nira. "Let's make some noise." They set off, leaving obvious signs of their passage. Broken branches, disturbed soil, and even the occasional piece of discarded equipment marked their trail. It was a dangerous game, walking the fine line between being noticeable enough to draw attention and not so careless as to get caught. Meanwhile, Dennis's clone and Kai moved with preternatural stealth through the alien landscape. They utilized every scrap of cover, from towering crystal formations to dense patches of fungal growth that pulsed with an eerie, internal light. Their progress was swift but fraught with danger. At one point, they found themselves pinned down behind a cluster of rock formations as a Krelthax patrol passed nearby. Kai's enhanced senses picked up the faintest sounds of the enemy's movement, allowing them to time their own motions perfectly. As they crouched in the shadows, Dennis's clone found himself marveling at the hybrid's abilities. "How does it feel?" he whispered, "being neither fully human nor Vorta?" Kai's eyes, reflecting the bioluminescent glow around them, turned to the clone. "How does it feel being neither the original nor truly unique?" The question hung between them, unanswered but understood. Back at the secondary facility, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The confined space and dwindling resources were taking their toll on the group's morale. Asha and Lyra's rivalry, once a source of productive competition, had devolved into bitter sniping. "We need to focus on immediate survival," Asha insisted during one particularly heated exchange. "Your long-term plans won't matter if we all starve to death." Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. "And your short-sighted rationing will doom the entire species. We need to think beyond just tomorrow." Dr. Zira, caught between the two strong-willed women, struggled to maintain order while continuing her vital research. The latest batch of hybrid children were developing at an astonishing rate, some already approaching physical maturity. Their rapidly evolving abilities were both a source of hope and a new challenge to manage. One young hybrid, barely a week old but with the appearance and intellect of a teenager, approached Dr. Zira as she worked. "I can hear them," the girl said, her voice eerily calm. "The Krelthax. They're getting closer." Before Dr. Zira could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the security feeds, they watched in horror as Krelthax forces approached from multiple directions. Outside, Dennis's clone and Kai arrived just in time to witness the enemy's advance. They crouched at the edge of a ravine, surveying the scene before them. "We're too late," Kai murmured. The clone shook his head. "No, we just need to be smarter than them." Using their combined skills, the clone's strategic thinking and Kai's enhanced abilities, they formulated a plan to breach the Krelthax lines. It was daring, bordering on suicidal, but it was their only chance. As the Krelthax forces closed in on the secondary facility, Dennis, Tila, and Nir were engaged in their most audacious deception yet. They had stumbled upon a hidden Vorta weapons cache, arming themselves with advanced technology that evened the odds against their pursuers. Dennis hefted a sleek, Vorta-designed rifle, its weight unfamiliar but comforting. "Ready to make some new friends?" he asked, a grim smile on his face. Tila nodded, her own weapon humming with potential energy. "Let's introduce ourselves." What followed was a masterclass in guerrilla tactics. They struck at the Krellthax forces, using the alien terrain to their advantage. Each attack was precisely calculated to inflict maximum damage while maintaining the illusion of a larger force. The plan worked almost too well. As more Krellthax diverted to deal with this apparent threat, Dennis and his team found themselves running out of options for escape. "We've got their attention," Nira said as they took cover behind a fallen alien tree, its crystalline branches splintering under enemy fire. "Now what?" Dennis looked at his companions, both trusted allies forged in the crucible of their shared ordeal. "Now," he said, checking the charge on his weapon, "we make our stand." As the three groups, Dennis's team, his clone, and Kai, and the inhabitants of the secondary facility, faced their respective crises, a new factor entered the equation. Long-range sensors detected an approaching Vorta fleet, responding to earlier distress calls. The news spread quickly, eliciting a mix of hope and dread. The promise of rescue was tempered by the knowledge that the Vorta's arrival could escalate the conflict to interstellar war. In the secondary facility, Dr. Zira made a breakthrough in her research, developing a method to accelerate and stabilize the hybrid maturation process. But implementing it would require Dennis's direct involvement, a fact that added urgency to the clone's mission. As the clone and Kai prepared to make their desperate attempt to breach the Krellthax lines, Dennis and his team set up for what might be their last stand. And within the besieged facility, the diverse group of humans, Vorta, and hybrids steeled themselves for the coming assault. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just their individual fates, but potentially the future of two species. The air crackled with tension, the strange alien sun setting on a world poised on the brink of chaos. Chaos. The alien world held its breath, awaiting the outcome of the impending clash. As the Krellthax forces closed in on the secondary facility, Dennis's clone and Kai emerged from the dense, bioluminescent foliage. They crouched at the edge of a ravine, surveying the scene before them. The facility's outer defenses were visible in the distance, a stark silhouette against the alien sky. "We're too late," Kai murmured, his enhanced senses picking up the faint sounds of approaching enemy forces. The clone shook his head, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "No, we just need to be smarter than them." Using their combined skills, the clone's strategic thinking and Kai's enhanced abilities, they formulated a plan to breach the Krellthax lines. It was daring, bordering on suicidal, but it was their only chance. They moved swiftly, taking advantage of every shadow and outcropping. Kai's heightened reflexes allowed them to dodge patrols with mere seconds to spare. As they neared the facility's perimeter, a figure emerged from behind a makeshift barricade. "Halt!" a familiar voice called out. It was Asha, her weapon trained on them. The clone stepped forward, hands raised. "Asha, it's me. Well, sort of. I'm Dennis's clone." Asha's eyes widened in recognition, taking in the clone's familiar features. Without lowering her weapon, she nodded towards the facility. "Inside, now. We don't have much time." Once inside, the clone delivered their urgent warning about the impending Krellthax assault. The news spread quickly, sending the facility into a flurry of activity. Meanwhile, Dennis, Tila, and Nira found themselves cornered by a large Krellthax patrol. They took cover behind a fallen crystalline tree, its shattered branches refracting the alien sunlight. "Any brilliant ideas?" Tila asked, her voice tense as she checked the charge on her Vorta rifle. Dennis gripped his own weapon, feeling its unfamiliar weight. "Just one. We fight our way out." With a nod to his companions, Dennis leapt from cover, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The advanced Vorta weaponry tore through the Krellthax ranks, creating chaos in their formation. Nira moved with inhuman speed, her hybrid physiology allowing her to close the distance to the nearest enemies before they could react. She engaged in close combat, her enhanced strength proving devastating against the unprepared Krellthax. Tila provided covering fire, her military training evident in every precise shot. "Dennis, on your left," she shouted, taking down a Krellfax soldier that had flanked their position. The firefight was intense but brief. As the last Krellfax fell, Dennis signaled to his team, "Move! Into the forest!" They sprinted into the dense, alien woodland, the strange flora providing cover from any pursuing forces. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed with each step, creating a disorienting light show that masked their trail. Back at the secondary facility, Dr. Zira burst into the command center, her eyes wild with excitement. "I've done it!" she exclaimed, drawing everyone's attention. "I've developed a method to accelerate and stabilize the hybrid maturation process." The clone stepped forward, hope and apprehension warring on his face. "That's great news, but how does it work?" Dr. Zira's expression grew serious. "It requires fresh genetic material from Dennis. Without it, the process is unstable." All eyes turned to the clone. He swallowed hard, understanding the implication. I have the same DNA. Would that work?" A tense silence fell over the room. Lyra was the first to speak up. "We can't make that decision without Dennis's consent. It's not right." Asha countered, her voice firm. "We may not have a choice. The Krellfax are coming, and we need every advantage we can get." As the debate raged on, the facility's alarms blared to life. The Krellfax assault force had been detected, approaching rapidly from multiple directions. Asha sprang into action, her previous argument forgotten in the face of immediate danger. "Everyone to your stations. Mature hybrids form defensive lines. We need to hold them off as long as possible." The clone, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to prove his worth, stepped forward. "I'll join the defense. I know their tactics. I can help predict their movements." Lyra nodded, setting aside her earlier objections. "I'll start preparing evacuation plans, just in case." As the facility mobilized for battle, Dr. Zira pulled the clone aside. "We need to make a decision about the genetic material. Every moment we delay could mean the difference between survival and extinction." The clone looked at the approaching Krellfax forces on the monitoring screens, then back at Dr. Zira. With a deep breath, he made his choice. "Do it. Use my DNA. If it can save lives, it's worth the risk." Dr. Zira nodded solemnly and hurried back to her lab, leaving the clone to join Asha in coordinating the defense. Outside the facility, Dennis's team continued their evasion tactics. They paused in a small clearing, catching their breath as Tila examined a captured Krellfax communication device. "Listen to this," she said, her voice low. "They know about the Vorta fleet. They're going to hit the facility hard before reinforcements arrive." Dennis's face hardened. "We need to buy them more time." He turned to Nira, an idea forming. "How do you feel about a little sabotage?" As they began to formulate their plan, the air around them seemed to crackle with tension. In the distance, the first sounds of battle could be heard as the Krellfax forces engaged the facility's outer defenses. The fate of two species now balanced on a knife's edge. In the facility, the clone prepared for battle alongside the hybrids he had come to warn. In the alien forest, Dennis and his team readied themselves for a daring mission. And in her lab, Dr. Zira worked feverishly to unlock the potential of accelerated hybrid maturation. The alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. The night ahead promised to be long and fraught with danger. But for now, each group focused on their immediate tasks, knowing that their actions in the coming hours could change the course of history. The alien sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the landscape into an eerie twilight. Dennis, Tila, and Nira crouched in the dense undergrowth, their eyes fixed on the Krellfax command post looming before them. "Ready," Dennis whispered, his hand tightening on the Vorta rifle. Tila nodded, her face set with perseverance. Let's cause some chaos. They moved swiftly and silently, years of training evident in every step. Nira's hybrid physiology allowed her to slip through gaps that would have stopped her human companions, creating distractions that drew Krelthax guards away from their posts. Inside the command post, Dennis and Tila worked in perfect synchronization. Tila's expertise with alien technology allowed her to quickly identify the central communication hub, while Dennis kept watch. "Got it," Tila murmured, her fingers flying over the alien controls. "Uploading the virus. Now." A series of lights flashed across the console, followed by a low, ominous hum. Dennis grinned. "That should do it. Let's move." As they retreated, the effects of their sabotage became immediately apparent. Krelthax soldiers ran in confused patterns, their coordinated assault on the secondary facility dissolving into chaos. Back at the facility, Asha and the clone stood side by side, directing the defense from a makeshift command center. The clone's eyes widened as he watched the enemy's formation crumble on the tactical display. "They did it," he breathed. "Dennis and his team must have hit their comms." Asha nodded, a fierce smile on her face. "Then it's time to push back. All units, prepare to counterattack." The newly matured hybrids surged forward, their inexperience offset by raw power and adaptability. The clone watched in awe as they learned and adjusted their tactics mid-battle, becoming more effective with each passing minute. Lyra burst into the command center, her eyes bright with excitement. "The tunnel system. We can use it to outflank them." The clone turned to Asha. "She's right. If we send small teams through the tunnels, we can hit them from behind while they're disorganized." Asha considered for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. Take a team of hybrids and lead the assault yourself." As the clone prepared to leave, Dr. Zira's voice crackled over the comms. "I've done it. The accelerated maturation process is stable. I can produce more enhanced hybrids to reinforce our defenses." A cheer went up from the command center, but Asha's face remained serious. "We'll need to carefully manage our resources. We can't afford to sacrifice our long-term survival for short-term gains." Outside the facility, Dennis, Tila, and Nira fought their way through the disorganized Krelthax forces. The alien troops, cut off from Central Command, fell easily before the trio's coordinated attacks. "There!" Tila shouted, pointing to a group of figures huddled behind a fallen tree. "Civilians." Dennis squinted, recognizing the distinctive features of the Vorta. "They must have fled when the fighting started. We can't leave them here." As they approached, a young Vorta female stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You're human," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "I'm Dennis. This is Tila and Nira. We're here to help." The young Vorta nodded. "I'm Vela. I can sense the Krelthax. Their movements, their intentions. It might help us avoid them." Dennis exchanged a look with Tila. This could be the edge they needed. "All right, Vela. Lead the way." Back at the facility, the tide of battle was turning. The clone led his team of hybrids through the twisting tunnels, emerging behind the Krelthax lines. They struck hard and fast, sowing confusion among the already disorganized enemy forces. But their victory was short-lived. A blinding flash of light split the sky, followed by a thunderous boom that shook the ground. The clone watched in horror as a section of the facility's outer wall crumbled under the assault of a massive energy weapon. "Fall back!" he shouted, leading his team to safety as debris rained down around them. "Asha, we have a problem. They've deployed some kind of heavy artillery. Our defenses won't hold against that for long." Inside the command center, Asha's face was grim. "Lyra, start moving non-combatants into the tunnels. Dr. Zira and her research take priority. We need to be ready to evacuate if necessary." As Lyra sprang into action, the clone's voice came over the comms again. I have an idea. If we can get close enough, we might be able to take out that weapon. But it's risky. Asha hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Do it. Take whatever forces you need. Outside, Dennis and his group, now swelled by the addition of the Vorta civilians, approached the facility. Vela suddenly stiffened, her eyes going wide. There's a group ahead, different from the others. More focused. No sooner had she spoken than a barrage of energy bolts tore through the air around them. Dennis dove for cover, pulling Vela down with him. Tila, Nira, protect the civilians. Through the chaos, Dennis caught sight of their attackers. A squad of Krelthax soldiers, their armor more ornate than the others they'd encountered. At their head stood a towering figure, his presence radiating authority. Commander Zax, Tila spat, recognizing the Krelthax leader. Dennis gritted his teeth, raising his Vorta rifle. Looks like we'll have to fight our way through. Vela, keep the civilians safe. Tila, Nira, with me. As the firefight erupted, the clone and his team of hybrids moved through the tunnels, emerging near the Krelthax energy weapon. The massive device pulsed with power, each blast sending tremors through the ground. There, the clone whispered, pointing to a group of Krelthax operating the weapon. That's our target. One of the hybrids, a young female with iridescent skin, spoke up. I can create a distraction. Draw their fire while you take out the operators. The clone nodded, impressed by her quick thinking. Do it. As the hybrid leapt into action, the clone led the rest of the team towards the weapon. The battle that followed was intense, pushing both the clone and the hybrids to their limits. Inside the facility, Asha watched the multiple crises unfolding with growing concern. The energy weapon continued to pound their defenses. Dennis and his team were engaged in a fierce firefight outside, and the clone strike team was in the midst of a high-risk operation. She turned to Lyra, who had returned from organizing the evacuation. We need to be ready to move everyone out through the tunnels at a moment's notice. The Vorta fleet is still days away. We might not have a choice but to abandon the facility. As Lyra nodded grimly and moved to make the necessary preparations, Asha turned back to the tactical display. The next few minutes would determine everything. She could only hope that Dennis, his clone, and their allies would be able to turn the tide before it was too late. Late, the fate of two species hung in the balance, and time was running out. A deafening explosion rocked the facility, sending tremors through the ground. Asha stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the command console. Status report, she barked. Directed on the east wing, a technician responded, his voice strained. Structural integrity compromised. We can't take many more hits like that. Asha's expression resolute as she made the call she'd been dreading. Initiate full evacuation protocol. Get everyone into the tunnels. Now. As alarms blared throughout the facility, Lyra sprang into action, coordinating the mass exodus. Dr. Zira, you and your team have priority. Gather all critical research materials and equipment. Focus on what's essential for continuing the breeding program. Dr. Zira nodded grimly, her team already mobilizing. The newly matured hybrid stepped in, their enhanced strength allowing them to move heavy equipment with ease. The evacuation began in earnest, a steady stream of personnel and resources flowing into the tunnel system. Outside, Dennis, Tila, and Nira found themselves locked in a fierce firefight with Commander Zax's elite squad. Energy bolts sizzled through the air as they ducked and weaved between cover. Nira, on your left, Dennis shouted. The hybrid companion spun, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to dodge a Krelthax soldier's attack. In one fluid motion, she closed the distance and engaged the alien in hand-to-hand combat. Her enhanced strength and agility were on full display as she matched the Krelthax blow for blow. Tila provided covering fire, her military expertise guiding their movements. Dennis, we need to flank them. There's an opening to the right. Dennis nodded, his mind racing. He caught Vela's eye and gestured towards the Vorta civilians. Keep them safe. We'll draw their fire. As Dennis and Tila maneuvered, Vela's empathic abilities came into play. Her eyes widened as she sensed the Krellfax's intentions. Watch out! They're planning to outflank you. Thanks to Vela's warning, Dennis was able to adjust their strategy on the fly. They narrowly avoided being surrounded, instead turning the tables on the Krellfax squad. Meanwhile, deep within the facility's tunnel system, Lyra made a startling discovery. As she directed the flow of evacuees, her eyes caught a glimmer of something in a shadowy alcove. Curiosity piqued, she investigated, revealing a hidden chamber filled with ancient Vorta technology. Her breath caught as she recognized a device similar to the teleportation unit they'd used earlier. Asha, she called over the comm, you need to see this. I think I've found our ace in the hole. As Lyra worked to activate the device, the clone strike team reached the Krellfax energy weapon. The massive apparatus loomed before them, its ominous hum punctuated by regular bursts of destructive energy. Remember the plan. The clone instructed his team of hybrids. Mira, you're on distraction duty. The rest of you with me. We take out the operators and sabotage the core. Mira, the young hybrid with iridescent skin, nodded. Without hesitation, she darted out from cover, her movements a blur as she drew the Krellfax fire. The clone led the charge towards the weapons control center, his mind racing with tactical calculations. The ensuing battle was intense, pushing the clone and his team to their limits. The hybrids demonstrated their superior combat abilities, each engaging multiple Krellfax simultaneously. The clone coordinated their efforts, his analytical mind processing the chaotic battlefield with remarkable clarity. Back in the facility, Dr. Zira faced a critical decision. As she oversaw the evacuation of her lab, her eyes fell on the last batch of genetic material from Dennis's clone. Time was running out, resources were dwindling, but the potential. With a deep breath, she made her choice. Initiate the final accelerated breeding cycle, she ordered her team. We might not get another chance. As the last round of the program began, Dennis and his team finally broke through the Krellfax lines. They burst through the facility entrance, battered but alive. Asha was there to meet them, her face a mix of relief and urgency. Dennis, thank God, we're evacuating through the tunnels. The Vorta fleet is delayed. We need to hold out longer than we thought. Dennis nodded, his mind already shifting to their new predicament. As he turned to help with the evacuation, he caught sight of his clone stumbling through a side entrance, clutching a bleeding wound. For a moment, the two locked eyes. Despite their complex history, a wave of mutual understanding passed between them. They were two sides of the same coin, both fighting for the same cause. The facility shook again as Commander Zax's forces renewed their assault. The Krellfax were converging, determined to prevent the Vorta's escape. In the distance, the sound of heavy artillery signaled a new, more dangerous phase of the attack. Dennis surveyed the chaotic scene. The stream of evacuees, the wounded being tended to, the last-ditch efforts to salvage what they could. His mind raced, formulating a plan even as the walls around them began to crumble. The next few moments would determine everything. As energy blasts rocked the facility and the tunnels groaned under the strain, Dennis knew they were out of time. Whatever they did next would shape not just their fate, but the future of two species. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders as he prepared to make the hardest decision of his life. With a deep breath, he turned to face the others. We need to split up, Dennis announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. I'll lead a small team to create a diversion at the main entrance. The rest of you, get to the tunnels and evacuate. Asha's eyes widened. Dennis, that's too dangerous, Dash. It's our only chance, he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Tila, you're with me. I need 3 of the new hybrids as well. As Dennis quickly assembled his team, Asha took charge of the main evacuation effort. Lyra, guide them through the tunnels. Dr. Zira, ensure all critical research materials are secured. The clone, despite his wound, stepped forward. I'll help coordinate the tunnel evacuation. Dennis nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. As the 2 groups prepared to separate, the facility shook violently, a reminder of the pressing danger. Move out, Dennis ordered, leading his small team towards the main entrance. The scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. Krelfax forces swarmed the area, their energy weapons cutting through the air. Dennis and his team took cover behind a partially collapsed wall, assessing the situation. All right, Dennis said, turning to the 3 hybrids. Show me what you can do. The hybrids didn't hesitate. The first, a young male with striking silver eyes, closed them in concentration. Suddenly, a Krelfax soldier stumbled, his movements becoming erratic. I can influence their minds, the hybrid explained, his voice strained with effort. The second hybrid, a female with iridescent skin, raised her hand. The debris around them began to shift and reform, creating a barrier between them and the enemy fire. Matter manipulation, she said simply. The third, another male with an otherworldly grace, seemed to shimmer slightly. I can bend light, he explained. Make us harder to see. Dennis nodded, impressed. Perfect. Let's give them hell. They burst from cover, their unexpected abilities catching the Krelfax off guard. The mind-influencing hybrid sowed confusion among the enemy ranks, causing soldiers to fire on their own allies. The matter manipulator created barriers and weapons from the surrounding debris, while the lightbender made their movements nearly impossible to track. Tila moved with practiced precision, her military training evident in every shot fired. Dennis coordinated their efforts, his tactical mind processing the evolving battlefield. Meanwhile, in the tunnels, Asha led the desperate evacuation. The narrow passages echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps and labored breathing. Dr. Zira clutched a case containing vital genetic samples, her face a mask of drive. This way, the clone called out, guiding a group through a fork in the tunnels. Despite his injury, he pushed on, his intimate knowledge of the facility proving invaluable. Lyra sprinted ahead, reaching the hidden chamber with the ancient Vorta teleportation device. Her fingers flew over the controls, coaxing more power from the aging machinery. I've increased its capacity, she reported as the first group approached. But it's unstable. We need to move quickly. The device hummed to life, enveloping the first batch of evacuees in a shimmering field of energy. With a flash, they vanished, transported to safety. Lyra immediately began preparing for the next group, acutely aware of the device's growing instability. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the tunnels. Dust and small rocks rained down as a section of the ceiling collapsed, cutting off one of the escape routes. Asha! The clone's voice crackled over the comm. We've lost the eastern tunnel. Rerouting evacuees now. Asha gritted her teeth, quickly adjusting their plans. Understood. Dr. Zira, your team has priority. Get to Lyra's position immediately. As Dr. Zira's team rushed towards a teleportation device, another tremor rocked the facility. This one was different, more focused, more deliberate. They're targeting the tunnels, Asha realized with growing horror. They know we're escaping. Back at the entrance, Dennis and his team found themselves locked in an increasingly desperate battle. Despite their initial success, the sheer number of Krelfax forces was overwhelming. A sudden burst of enemy fire caught Tila in the shoulder, spinning her around. Dennis rushed to her side, dragging her behind cover. I'm fine, she gasped, clutching her wound. Keep fighting. One of the hybrids, seeing their predicament, made a split-second decision. He charged forward, using his matter manipulation to bring down a section of the facility's structure. The collapsing debris crushed a squad of advancing Krellfax, but also sealed off their own escape route. "No!" Dennis shouted, but it was too late. The hybrid disappeared under the falling rubble, his sacrifice buying them precious time. As dust filled the air, Dennis surveyed their situation. They were trapped, cut off from the main group, with Krellfax forces regrouping on the other side of the debris. In the tunnels, the clone made a startling discovery. Hidden behind a false wall, he found a cache of advanced Vorta weapons. Among them were devices that emitted a strange, pulsing energy. "Asha," he called over the comm, "I've found something. Weapons that might be able to disrupt the Krellfax shields." This discovery breathed new life into the evacuation efforts. Armed with these new weapons, the Vorta and hybrids were able to push back against Krellfax units that had breached the tunnel system. As the battle raged on multiple fronts, Vela, the young Vorta empath, felt a strange sensation building within her. Her empathic abilities, stretched to their limit by the chaos around her, seemed to be evolving. With a gasp, she realized she could not only sense the Krellfax emotions, but project her own onto them. Concentrating hard, she focused on a group of advancing soldiers. Suddenly, they stopped, looking around in confusion. I can make them feel what I want," Vela said, her voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. This unexpected development proved crucial in clearing escape routes for the refugees, allowing groups to slip past disoriented Krellfax forces. In the teleportation chamber, Dr. Zira made a difficult decision. Looking at the vital genetic samples and research data in her possession, she realized the risk of losing everything was too great. "Lyra," she called, "I need to send this separately. Can you target a specific location?" Lyra nodded, her fingers already inputting the coordinates. With a flash, a capsule containing the concentrated essence of their work vanished, transported to a secure location. As multiple crises unfolded across the facility, Dennis and his trapped team discovered a potential game-changer. A structural weakness, if exploited, could bring down a significant portion of the facility onto the main Krellfax force. "If we do this," Dennis said grimly, "we probably won't make it out." Before they could decide, Asha's voice crackled over their comms. "Dennis, we've found another escape route, but it won't stay open for long. Can you make it back?" Dennis looked at his battered team, then at the Krellfax forces regrouping beyond the rubble. The choice before him was impossible. Stay and potentially deal a crippling blow to the enemy, or attempt a risky escape to rejoin the others. Time was running out. The facility groaned around them. The tunnels threatened to collapse at any moment, and the teleportation device grew more unstable with each use. Every second brought them closer to either salvation or destruction. As energy weapons fire erupted again, Dennis steeled himself to make a decision that would shape the fate of two species. As the weight of his decision bore down on him, Dennis made his choice. "We're staying," he announced, his voice firm despite the chaos around them. "We can trigger a collapse that'll cripple their main force. It's our best shot at buying time for the others." Tila nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and willpower. "I'm with you," she said, wincing as she adjusted her grip on her weapon. Dennis turned to the two remaining hybrids. "You too. Get back to the others. Take the alternate route Asha mentioned. And take this." He handed them a data chip. "It contains vital research data. Make sure it gets out." The hybrids hesitated for a moment, then accepted their mission. As they disappeared into the smoky haze, Dennis and Tila set to work. They moved quickly through the crumbling facility, planting explosive charges at key structural points. The ground shook beneath their feet as Krellfax forces pounded the building from outside. As they placed a final charge, Tila stumbled upon a hidden panel. "Dennis, look at this," she called. They pried it open to reveal a small, sleek pod. Dennis's eyes widened in recognition. An emergency escape pod. For Vorta leadership, I'd guess. Tila examined the pod systems. It's functional. Barely big enough for two, but it's our best shot at surviving this. Dennis nodded, his mind racing. Let's load it with any remaining research materials we can find. We might need bargaining chips if we run into trouble out there. As they worked, the situation in the tunnels grew increasingly dire. Asha led the main evacuation group, her voice steady as she called out directions. Keep moving. We're almost to the teleportation chamber. Behind them, the clone wielded the newfound Vorta weapons with deadly precision. The strange, pulsing energy disrupted the Krelthak's shields, allowing him to hold off the pursuing forces. In the teleportation chamber, Lyra's fingers danced over the controls of the ancient device. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she pushed the machinery to its limits. With each use, the energy fluctuations grew more violent, threatening to bring down the tunnel around them. Hurry, she called as another group of evacuees entered the chamber. The device hummed to life, enveloping them in shimmering energy before they vanished with a crack of displaced air. Amidst the chaos, Vela found her empathic abilities evolving in ways she never imagined. As panic threatened to overtake a group of evacuees in a narrow passage, she projected a wave of calm. The effect was immediate, preventing a potentially deadly stampede. Moments later, her heightened senses detected a Krelthak's ambush party hiding in a side tunnel. There, she pointed, allowing the Vorta defenders to neutralize the threat before it could strike. Dr. Zira, overseeing the evacuation of the latest batch of hybrids, made a startling observation. One of the young hybrids, eyes unfocused, suddenly called out a warning. The ceiling! It's going to collapse! Seconds later, a section of the tunnel roof gave way, exactly where the hybrid had indicated. Dr. Zira's mind raced with the implications. Limited precognition, she muttered, both excited and terrified by the development. Back in the main facility, Dennis and Tila finalized the detonation sequence. They cast a final glance at the destruction around them before climbing into the escape pod. Ready? Dennis asked, his hand hovering over the launch controls. Tila nodded, gripping her seat tightly. As I'll ever be. Dennis activated the pod just as he triggered the explosives. The small vessel shot out of the facility as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the entire structure. The explosion was catastrophic. Krelthak's artillery positions disintegrated in the blast, and their command structure dissolved into chaos. But the devastation wasn't limited to the surface. In the tunnels, the shockwave triggered a chain reaction of cave-ins. Asha, seeing the tunnel ahead collapse, made a split-second decision. "Change of plans," she shouted. Turning to the clone, she ordered, "Take them through the eastern passage. I'll hold them off here." The clone hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly. As he led the group away, Asha and a small team took up defensive positions, preparing for the Krelthak's onslaught. In the confusion following the explosion, Commander Zax found himself separated from his troops. Stumbling through the wreckage, he discovered a hidden Vorta laboratory. His eyes widened as he recognized the genetic manipulation technology. "This could change everything," he muttered, already formulating plans to secure the prototypes for himself. The clone led his group through increasingly treacherous tunnels. Suddenly, he detected a strange odor. "Stop!" he called out, recognizing the scent of toxic gas released by the facility's destruction. Using his intimate knowledge of Vorta physiology, he guided the group through the danger zone. But the exposure took its toll, leaving many of the evacuees weakened and struggling. In the teleportation chamber, Lyra faced a grim reality. The device was on the verge of complete failure. She took a deep breath, knowing what she had to do. "I'm reconfiguring for one final transport," she announced. "It'll be larger than any before, but it's our last chance." As she worked, she knew the odds of surviving the process herself were slim. But with the lives of so many in the balance, there was no other choice. Meanwhile, Dennis and Tila's escape pod hurtled through the air, caught in the shockwave of the explosion. Alarms blared as systems failed, sending them veering off course. "We're losing control," Tila shouted over the din. "Navigation's down." Dennis fought with the controls, but it was clear they were heading into uncharted territory. As the pod disappeared over the horizon, they found themselves further and further from their intended destination, with no way to contact their allies. In orbit, the Vorta rescue fleet intercepted fragmented distress signals from the surface. Unable to provide direct support due to the ongoing space battle, they dispatched a squadron of stealthy extraction ships. As the small ships entered the atmosphere, the situation on the ground remained chaotic. Multiple groups fought for survival. Dennis and Tila lost in their damaged escape pod, Asha holding off Krelthak's forces in the tunnels, the clone guiding weakened evacuees through toxic passages, Lyra preparing for a final, desperate teleportation attempt, and Commander Zax seeking to abscond with stolen Vorta technology. The fate of the breeding program, and with it the future of human-Vorta relations, hung by a thread. As the extraction ships raced towards the surface, the survivors on the ground fought against time, their enemies, and the very planet itself in a desperate bid for survival. Survival and the continuation of the breeding program. As the dust settled from the facility's collapse, Dennis slowly regained consciousness. His head throbbed and the acrid smell of smoke filled his nostrils. Blinking away the haze, he found himself surrounded by a sea of vibrant green foliage. The escape pod had crash-landed in an alien jungle, its sleek metal frame now twisted and embedded in the soft earth. "Tila," Dennis called out, his voice hoarse. A weak groan answered him from the other side of the pod. He scrambled over to find Tila pinned beneath a fallen branch, a deep gash across her forehead. Dennis's military training kicked in as he assessed her injuries. "Stay still," he instructed, carefully lifting the branch off her. Using the limited medical supplies from the pod, Dennis cleaned and bandaged Tila's wound. As he worked, his eyes darted around the unfamiliar landscape. Strange, iridescent plants swayed in the breeze, and distant calls of unknown creatures echoed through the trees. "We're off course," Tila mumbled, wincing as Dennis applied pressure to her injury. "Way off course," Dennis agreed, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "But we're alive, and that's what matters right now." As Dennis tended to Tila, the clone led his group of evacuees through the toxic-filled tunnels. The noxious fumes burned their eyes and throats, slowing their progress to a crawl. "We can't keep going like this," one of the hybrids gasped, supporting a weakened Vorta. The clone's eyes narrowed as he scanned their surroundings. His gaze fell upon a pile of discarded equipment. "Wait here," he ordered, moving towards the debris. With deft hands, he assembled an improvised filtration system using salvaged parts and fabric from their clothing. "It's not perfect," he explained, distributing the makeshift mass, "but it should help us breathe easier." The group pressed on, their steps steadier with the clone's invention, protecting them from the worst of the toxic atmosphere. Meanwhile, Asha found herself cornered in a partially collapsed section of the facility. Her team's ammunition was running dangerously low as wave after wave of Krelthak's soldiers advanced. "We're almost out of options," one of her fighters reported grimly. Asha's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything they could use. A glint of metal caught her attention. She pried open a hidden panel, revealing a cache of sleek, unfamiliar devices. "What are those?" her companion asked. Asha hefted one of the devices, recognizing its design. Experimental pheromone weapons. They're designed to manipulate hormonal responses. Without hesitation, she activated the device and hurled it towards the advancing Krelthaks. A fine mist erupted from the weapon, enveloping the enemy soldiers. Almost immediately, The Krellfax began to stumble, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. "It's working," Asha exclaimed, grabbing more of the devices. "Use these to confuse them. We might just have a chance now." In the teleportation chamber, Lyra's fingers flew over the controls as she prepared for one final, desperate attempt. "Everyone inside now!" she shouted as the device hummed to life. Energy crackled around the chamber, growing more intense with each passing second. As the last group of evacuees entered the teleportation field, Lyra activated the sequence. A blinding flash filled the room, accompanied by an ear-splitting crack. When the light faded, the chamber was empty save for Lyra and a handful of survivors who hadn't made it in time. The ancient device sparked and sputtered, smoke pouring from its overloaded circuits. A deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. "The tunnels are collapsing," one of the survivors cried out. Lyra grabbed a nearby data pad, her mind racing. "We need to find another way out. There must be unmapped sections we can use." As they hurried from the chamber, the walls around them groaned under the strain of shifting earth. Above the planet's surface, the Vorta rescue fleet engaged in a fierce battle with Krellfax forces. Amidst the chaos, a squadron of stealthy extraction ships slipped past the enemy's defenses, diving into the planet's atmosphere. Captain Nira of the lead extraction ship studied the fragmented distress signals emanating from the surface. "We have multiple groups scattered across the planet," she informed her crew. "Priority is retrieving key personnel and genetic research data. Let's move fast and stay undetected." The extraction ship split up, each heading towards a different signal source. As they descended, the true scale of destruction on the planet's surface became apparent. In a hidden Vorta laboratory, Commander Zax clutched a case containing prototype genetic manipulation technology. His uniform was torn and bloodied, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. "With this," he muttered to himself, "we can turn the tide of the war." As he moved to exit the lab, a group of mature hybrids led by Dr. Zira blocked his path. "I'm afraid we can't let you leave with that, Commander," Dr. Zira stated calmly, her posture tense and ready for action. Zax's hand moved to his weapon. "You don't understand the power of what's in this case. Step aside, or I'll be forced to." Before he could finish, one of the hybrids moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. The others followed suit, their enhanced abilities on full display as they engaged Zax and his remaining troops. Dr. Zira watched the conflict unfold, her mind racing with the possibilities the stolen technology presented. If they could secure it, perhaps they could enhance the hybrids even further. But at what cost? The ethical implications deeply affected on her as the battle for control of the genetic technology raged on. Back in the alien jungle, Dennis finished treating Tila's wounds to the best of his abilities. As he helped her sit up, a rustling in the nearby foliage caught his attention. He reached for his weapon, only to find it missing, likely lost in the crash. "Who's there?" Dennis called out, positioning himself protectively in front of Tila. To their astonishment, a group of plant-like beings emerged from the undergrowth. Their bodies seemed to be composed of living vines and leaves, with glowing, bioluminescent eyes. One of the creatures stepped forward, extending a tender-like appendage towards them. A soothing, melodic sound emanated from its form. Dennis and Tila exchanged glances, realizing they were face to face with an entirely new, intelligent species. As the beings approached, offering what appeared to be assistance, Dennis knew he had to tread carefully. Their survival, and potentially much more, hinged on how he handled this unexpected first contact. The jungle around them pulsed with life, hiding both dangers and possibilities. As Dennis prepared to communicate with these alien entities, he couldn't help but wonder about the fate of their companions and the breeding program they had fought so hard to protect. Little did he know, across the planet's surface, the other survivors were facing their own challenges. each group's actions shaping the future of both Vorta and human species in ways they had yet to comprehend. Dennis held his breath as the plant-like beings approached, their bioluminescent eyes casting an eerie glow in the dim jungle light. To his surprise, the melodic sound emanating from the creature grew more intricate, almost like a form of communication. Tila winced as she tried to sit up straighter. "Dennis, I think they're trying to help us." As if in response to her words, one of the beings extended a tendril towards Tila's injured forehead. Dennis instinctively moved to protect her, but Tila gently pushed his hand away. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let's see what they can do." The tendril gently touched Tila's wound, and a soft green light pulsed from the point of contact. Dennis watched in amazement as the gash began to close, the swelling visibly reducing. "Incredible," he breathed. "They're healing you." As the beings worked their botanical magic on Tila, Dennis's mind raced. He realized they had stumbled upon not just a new species, but potential allies in their fight for survival. "Thank you," he said to the creatures, hoping they could understand his gratitude. "We're not from this world. We're part of a project, a breeding program between humans and Vorta." The plant beings tilted their heads, their glowing eyes flickering with what seemed like curiosity. Dennis continued, explaining their conflict with the Krellthax and the destruction of their facility. As he spoke, more of the beings emerged from the jungle, surrounding them in a circle of swaying vines and leaves. One creature, larger than the others, stepped forward. It raised both tendril-like arms, and a holographic image appeared between them, showing a DNA helix intertwining with plant matter. Tila gasped, her pain forgotten. "Dennis, I think they're offering to help with the breeding program. They want to combine their biology with ours." The implications of this offer stunned Dennis. A three-way hybrid program, incorporating the advanced botanical abilities of these beings, could revolutionize their efforts and potentially give them an edge against the Krellthax. "We accept your offer," Dennis said, nodding to the large creature. "But first, we need to contact our people. Can you help us build a communication device?" The beings swayed in unison, their melodic sounds rising in what seemed like agreement. They gestured for Dennis and Tila to follow them deeper into the jungle, where the remains of their escape pod lay half buried in the lush vegetation. As they walked, Dennis turned to Tila. "I think we should call them the Florens. It seems fitting." Tila nodded, a smile playing on her now-healed face. "Agreed. Let's hope the Florens can help us reach the others before it's too late." Meanwhile, across the planet's unstable surface, the clone led his group of evacuees through the harsh, barren terrain. The toxic atmosphere had taken its toll, but his improvised filtration masks had saved many lives. However, a new challenge now faced them, one that defied all expectations. "Sir," one of the hybrids called out, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and awe. "Something's happening to the children." The clone turned to see a sight that made his blood run cold. The hybrid children, who had been barely more than toddlers when they'd escaped the facility, were now visibly aging before his eyes. Their limbs elongated, features sharpened, and in a matter of hours, they had grown into adolescence. It's the environment, the clone realized, his mind racing through possibilities. The harsh conditions are somehow accelerating their growth. As the group watched in stunned silence, the process continued. By nightfall, the children had become adults, their bodies fully matured and adapted to the hostile planet. One of the newly matured hybrids approached the clone, her eyes filled with a wisdom beyond her chronological years. "We understand now," she said, her voice steady. "Our purpose, our potential. We can help." The clone nodded, his inherited knowledge allowing him to grasp the situation quickly. This acceleration could be both a blessing and a curse, he mused. "We need to stabilize your growth while harnessing the adaptations you've developed." He turned to address the group. "Everyone, gather round. We have work to do." These new hybrids may be the key to our survival and the future of the breeding program. As the clone began to work with the accelerated hybrids, Asha and her team were making their way across the planet's treacherous landscape. The pheromone weapons had given them a much-needed advantage against the Krellthax, but Asha knew they weren't out of danger yet. "The extraction point should be just over this ridge," she called out to her team, her voice muffled by her protective mask. As they crested the hill, a shocking sight greeted them. A group of Krellthax soldiers stood in their path, but instead of attacking, they had their weapons lowered. One of them, bearing the insignia of a low-ranking officer, stepped forward with his hands raised. "Hold your fire," Asha ordered her team, her curiosity piqued by this unexpected development. The Krellthax officer spoke, his voice translated through a device on his armor. "I am Kraz. We wish to defect. We've seen the brutality of our own kind and want no part in it." Asha's team tensed, weapons at the ready, but she motioned for them to stand down. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. Kraz removed his helmet, revealing a face marked with scars and weary eyes. "Because I have information that could turn the tide of this war. Your breeding program, your hybrids, they're more important than you know. The Krellthax High Command fears them." Asha considered his words carefully. If what Kraz said was true, his intelligence could be invaluable. But trusting a Krellthax, even a deserter, was a risk. "All right," she said finally, "you can come with us to the extraction point. But one wrong move, and you'll wish you'd stayed with your own kind." As Asha's group, now joined by the Krellthax deserters, made their way to the rendezvous point, Lyra and her survivors faced a different kind of challenge deep underground. The ancient Vorta archive they discovered was a treasure trove of genetic information, but the constant tremors threatened to bury it all beneath tons of rock and earth. "We need to move faster," Lyra shouted over the rumble of shifting stone. "Download everything you can. We don't have much time." Her fingers flew over the control panels, copying vast amounts of data onto portable drives. Each tremor sent cascades of dust and small debris raining down on them, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. One of the survivors, a young Vorta scientist, called out in excitement. "Lyra, I've found something. It's a database of ancient breeding techniques. This could revolutionize the entire program." Lyra rushed over, her eyes widening as she scanned the information. "This is incredible. With this, we could create hybrids more powerful and adaptable than we ever imagined." A violent shake interrupted her thoughts, causing part of the ceiling to collapse nearby. Lyra looked at the vast array of data still left to save, then at the crumbling structure around them. "We can't save it all," she realized, her heart heavy. "We need to prioritize. Everyone, focus on the breeding data and genetic manipulation techniques. We'll have to leave the historical archives behind." As her team scrambled to save what they could, Lyra couldn't help but mourn the loss of so much knowledge. But she knew that the information they were saving could be the key to their species' survival. Above the planet's turbulent surface, the Vorta rescue fleet engaged in a fierce battle with the newly arrived Krellthax battlecruiser. The massive ship had appeared out of nowhere, its experimental cloaking technology rendering it invisible until the moment it opened fire. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Nira shouted as another volley of energy weapons lanced out from the Krellthax ship. "We can't let them disrupt the extraction. Our people on the surface are counting on us." The bridge of Nira's ship shook violently as a glancing blow struck their shields. Warning klaxons blared as systems reported damage across multiple decks. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "we've detected a weak point in their cloaking field. If we can hit it with a concentrated burst, we might be able to disrupt their advantage." Nira nodded grimly. "Do it, and send word to the extraction ships. Tell them to accelerate their timetable. We'll hold off the Krellthax as long as we can, but they need to get our people off that planet now. As the space battle raged on, the fate of those still trapped on the dying planet hung in the balance. The various groups, Dennis and Tila with their new Floran allies, the clones expedition of rapidly aged hybrids, Asha and her team with the Krellthax deserters, and Lyra's group in the crumbling archive, all raced against time, each holding a piece of the puzzle that could ensure their survival and shape the future of both human and Vorta species. Little did they know, the greatest challenges and most startling revelations were yet to come, as the planet's ecosystem continued to deteriorate and the full scope of the breeding program's importance began to unfold. The ground beneath them trembled, a stark reminder of the planet's increasing instability. Dennis turned to Tila, his eyes reflecting a mix of commitment and concern. We need to move quickly. The Florens have given us an incredible opportunity, but we're not out of danger yet. As if on cue, a distant rumble echoed through the jungle. The Florens' bioluminescent eyes flickered rapidly, their melodic sounds taking on a more urgent tone. Krellthax Patrol, Tila whispered, her body tensing. They must have tracked our pod's trajectory. The largest Floran, whom Dennis had begun to think of as their leader, extended its tendrils towards them. A holographic image materialized, showing a three-dimensional map of the surrounding area. Several red dots moved steadily towards their position. Dennis nodded, understanding the Floran's intent. They're offering to help us defend against the Krellthax. But how? The answer came swiftly as the Florens began to manipulate the jungle around them. Vines twisted and knotted themselves into natural barriers. Massive leaves unfurled, creating camouflage canopies that obscured their position from above. The very ground seemed to shift, forming subtle pitfalls and snares. Tila watched in amazement. It's like the whole forest is becoming a weapon. As the Florens worked their botanical magic, Dennis and Tila salvaged what they could from their escape pod. They found a few emergency beacons, some basic medical supplies, and a portable energy generator. We can use this, Dennis said, hefting the generator. If we can integrate it with the Floran's organic tech, we might be able to set up some kind of energy barrier. The Florens, seeming to understand his intent, guided Dennis and Tila to a clearing where they had created a makeshift laboratory. It was a stunning blend of advanced technology and living plant matter. Tendrils of bioluminescent vines wrapped around salvaged computer terminals, while large, pulsating pods served as organic power sources. As they worked to combine their technologies, the sound of approaching Krellthax grew louder. Dennis could hear the distinct hum of their energy weapons powering up. They're getting close, Tila said, her voice tense. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. The Floran leader approached them, extending a tendril towards Dennis. In its grasp was a small, pulsating seed pod. Dennis looked at it, then at the Floran. Are you offering to create a hybrid with us now? The Floran's melodic sound rose in affirmation. Dennis glanced at Tila, who nodded her agreement. All right, Dennis said, taking the pod. Let's see what we can do. As Dennis and Tila worked with the Florens to integrate the seed pod into their makeshift defenses, the first volley of Krellthax energy weapons tore through the jungle canopy. The air filled with the acrid smell of burned vegetation and ozone. They're here, Tila shouted, ducking behind a natural barricade of twisted vines. Dennis activated the energy generator, channeling its power into the Floran-enhanced defenses. A shimmering field of energy, tinged with a green organic glow, sprang up around their position. The Krellthax patrol burst into the clearing, their insectoid forms jam-packed with weapons. They fired on the energy barrier, their shots dissipating against its surface in a shower of sparks and pollen. It's working, Dennis exclaimed, but his triumph was short-lived. The barrier flickered, straining under the assault. The Florens swayed in unison, their collective effort visibly reinforcing the shield, but it was clear they couldn't hold out indefinitely. Tila grabbed one of the emergency beacons. "We need to call for help. Maybe the others are close enough to assist." As she activated the beacon, a surprising thing happened. The seed pod Dennis had been working with began to pulse rapidly, its glow intensifying. Tendrils of energy snaked out from it, intertwining with the beacon's signal. Suddenly, the air was filled with a cacophony of alien sounds. The Krellthax patrol stumbled, their coordinated attack faltering as they clutched at their heads. The hybrid seed, Dennis realized. It's amplifying the beacon's signal, but it's also emitting some kind of disruptive frequency. The Florens seized the opportunity. Vines shot out from the jungle, ensnaring the disoriented Krellthax. Pods burst open, releasing clouds of spores that seemed to interfere with the aliens' breathing apparatus. As the skirmish unfolded, Dennis turned his attention back to the seed pod. Its rapid growth was accelerating, fueled by the energy of the battle around it. Before his eyes, it began to take on a more defined shape, part plant, part humanoid. "Tila, look," he called out. "I think we've just witnessed the birth of the first human Vortifloran hybrid." The newly formed hybrid opened its eyes, glowing with an inner light that mirrored the Florens. It raised its hands, and a wave of energy pulsed outward, completely neutralizing the remaining Krellthax forces. As the dust settled, Dennis and Tila approached the hybrid, a mix of awe and uncertainty on their faces. The Florens gathered around, their melodic sounds rising in what seemed like a chorus of celebration. "Hello," Dennis said cautiously. "Can you understand us?" The hybrid turned its luminous gaze upon them. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonic blend of human speech and Floran melody. "I understand," it said. "I am the bridge between our kinds, and I sense others, more of us, scattered across this world. We must find them." Dennis nodded, his mind racing with the implications of this new development. The breeding program had taken an unexpected turn, one that could change everything in their fight for survival. As they prepared to leave their makeshift stronghold and search for the other survivors, a distant explosion lit up the sky. The space battle above the planet was intensifying, and time was running out. "We need to move," Tila urged. "Whatever's happening up there, it can't be good for us down here." Dennis agreed, gathering what supplies they could carry. As they set out into the jungle, guided by their new hybrid ally in the Florens, he couldn't help but wonder about the fate of the other survivors. Little did he know, across the planet's fracturing surface, the other groups were facing their own incredible challenges, each one shaping the future of their species in ways they had yet to fully comprehend. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the planet's instability became increasingly apparent. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and in the distance, they could see plumes of smoke rising from newly formed fissures in the earth. Dennis glanced at Tila, his expression a mix of persistence and concern. "We need to act fast. The planet's not going to hold together much longer." Tila nodded, her eyes scanning the surrounding foliage. "The Florens seem to know where they're going. I think they're leading us to a safer location." As if on cue, the Florens guided them into a clearing where a natural canopy of thick, intertwined vines provided shelter from the increasingly toxic atmosphere. At the center stood a structure that looked like a cross between a high-tech laboratory and a living organism. "Incredible," Dennis breathed, taking in the sight of bioluminescent tendrils wrapped around salvage computer terminals and pulsating pods serving as organic power sources. The Floran leader extended a tendril towards them, offering a small, pulsating seed pod. Dennis and Tila exchanged a look of understanding. This was their chance to contribute to the breeding program in a way they never imagined. "Let's do this," Tila said, her voice filled with perseverance. They worked quickly, combining their knowledge of human and vortigenetics with the Florin's unique biological capabilities. Using the portable energy generator from their escape pod, they powered up the hybrid equipment and began the delicate process of creating embryos that combined traits from all three species. As they worked, the distant sound of Krelthak's weapon's fire grew closer. Dennis wiped sweat from his brow, his hands steady as he manipulated the genetic sequencing equipment. "We're running out of time." Suddenly, the canopy above them shuddered as a Krelthak's energy blast struck nearby. The Florin's melodic sounds took on an urgent tone, and they began manipulating the surrounding plant life to create defensive barriers. Tila grabbed a makeshift weapon fashioned from Florin technology. "They're here. We need to protect the embryos." The clearing erupted into chaos as the Krelthak's patrol burst through the underbrush. Dennis and Tila ducked behind a living wall of vines, firing back with improvised energy weapons. The Florins joined the fray, using their ability to control plant life to entangle and disorient the Krelthak soldiers. Amidst the battle, one of the hybrid embryos in the makeshift lab began to pulse with an intense light. Dennis noticed it first, his eyes widening in disbelief. Tila looked. Before their eyes, the embryo began to grow at an accelerated rate, rapidly maturing into an adult form within a matter of minutes. As the new being emerged, the fighting around them seemed to pause, all eyes drawn to the extraordinary sight. The hybrid, a female with skin that shimmered with bioluminescence like the Florins, stood tall amidst the chaos. Her eyes, a striking blend of human and Vorta features, surveyed the scene with calm intelligence. "I am Zara," she said, her voice a harmonic blend of human speech and Florin melody. Without hesitation, Zara stepped forward, placing herself between the embattled groups. She raised her hands and a wave of energy pulsed outward. The Krelthak soldiers stumbled, their weapons malfunctioning as Zara's unique abilities interfered with their technology. Taking advantage of the Krelthak's confusion, Dennis and Tila pressed forward, working in tandem with the Florins to subdue the remaining soldiers. Zara moved with uncanny grace, her skin absorbing energy from the surrounding plant life as she neutralized the Krelthak's threat with precision and efficiency. As the last Krelthak soldier fell, an eerie silence descended upon the clearing. Dennis approached Zara cautiously, his scientific curiosity warring with his amazement. "How is this possible? Your growth, your abilities." Zara turned to him, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "I am the bridge between our kinds, as you intended. I can feel the planet's pain, and I know we don't have much time." Tila joined them, her gaze darting between Zara and the remaining hybrid embryos. "We need to get these embryos to safety. They could be the key to our survival." As if in response to Tila's words, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. In the distance, they could hear the sound of massive explosions as the planet's core continued to destabilize. Zara nodded, her expression resolute. "I can help protect them. We must move quickly to reach the extraction point." Dennis began gathering the precious embryos, carefully placing them in a protective container. "We'll need to navigate through some treacherous terrain. The planet's breaking apart faster than we anticipated." As they prepared to leave their makeshift stronghold, a distant roar caught their attention. Through a gap in the canopy, they saw a massive Krelthak's battlecruiser engaged in combat with the Vorta rescue fleet. Tila's eyes widened as she watched the space battle unfold. "Looks like our problems aren't limited to the ground. We'll need to time our extraction carefully." With Zara's extraordinary abilities augmenting their own skills, Dennis and Tila led their group out of the clearing. The Florins moved in harmony with them, using their control over the plant life to create paths through the increasingly unstable landscape. As they ventured forth, Dennis couldn't help but marvel at the turn of events. What had started as a desperate attempt at survival had evolved into something far beyond his wildest imagination. With Zara and the hybrid embryos, they carried the potential for a new future, one that blended the strengths of humans, Vorta, and Florens. But first, they had to survive the dying planet and reach the extraction point. As they pressed on, navigating through widening fissures and avoiding plumes of toxic gas, Dennis knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The fate of not just their group, but potentially entire species, rested on their ability to reach safety and continue the breeding program off-world. The ground shook beneath their feet, a stark reminder of the planet's imminent destruction. With Zara leading the way, her bioluminescent skin casting a soft glow in the darkening landscape, they pushed forward into the unknown, each step bringing them closer to either salvation or oblivion. Oblivion, the air grew thicker with each passing moment, filled with ash and noxious fumes from the planet's disintegrating core. Suddenly, a tremor more violent than any before shook the ground, nearly knocking them off their feet. Zara steadied Dennis and Tila, her enhanced strength keeping them upright. "We need to move faster," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I can sense a massive upheaval coming." As if to confirm her words, a chasm opened up behind them, swallowing trees and earth alike. The Florens emitted a high-pitched keening sound, their collective distress palpable. Dennis clutched the container of hybrid embryos tighter. "Which way, Zara?" She closed her eyes for a moment, her bioluminescent skin pulsing softly. "This way," she said, pointing to a narrow path that wound between two rising rock formations. They pressed on, the group moving as one through the treacherous terrain. Tila took point, her Vorta reflexes allowing her to navigate the shifting landscape with preternatural grace. Dennis followed close behind, cradling the precious embryos, while Zara brought up the rear, using her abilities to stabilize the path for the Florens. As they crested a hill, a sight both terrifying and awe-inspiring greeted them. In the valley below, they saw other groups converging on what appeared to be a Vorta extraction point. The sky above was lit up with the flashes of energy weapons as Vorta ships engaged in a desperate battle with Krelthak's forces. "Look!" Tila exclaimed, pointing to a group emerging from what looked like a partially collapsed underground facility. That's you, Dennis." "But how?" Dennis squinted, his eyes widening in recognition. "The clone," he breathed. "He made it out." As they watched, the clones group, carrying what appeared to be stasis pods and unfamiliar technology, joined forces with another team led by a woman with wild, unkempt hair. Feral-looking hybrids darted around her, engaging Krelthak's soldiers in chaotic skirmishes. "We need to get down there," Dennis said, his voice filled with purpose. "Whatever they've got, it might be our best chance of getting off this rock." They began their descent, carefully picking their way down the unstable slope. Halfway down, a deafening roar filled the air. A massive, grotesque figure appeared on the horizon, charging towards the extraction point. "By the Founders," Tila gasped. "What is that thing?" Zara's eyes narrowed. "I sense Vorta and Krelthak's energy signatures, but twisted, corrupted." Dennis felt a chill run down his spine. "Commander Zax. He must have survived the facility's destruction." As they neared the extraction point, chaos erupted. The feral hybrids engaged Zax, their unpredictable abilities keeping the monstrous commander at bay. The clone and the wild-haired woman quickly organized a defense, directing the various groups to fortify their position. Dennis, Tila, and Zara reached the perimeter, quickly ushered in by the defenders. The clone locked eyes with Dennis, a moment of understanding passing between them. "Glad you made it," the clone said, his voice gruff but sincere. "We've got a situation here." Dennis nodded, taking in the scene. "I can see that. What's the plan?" Before the clone could answer, a woman with an otherworldly presence stepped forward. Her eyes, ancient and wise, fixed on Zara. "You," she said, her voice resonating with power. You are the key. Zara met her gaze unflinchingly. I am Zara. Who are you? I am Zyra of the ancient Vorda, the woman replied. And together, we may yet save our people. As Zyra began to explain her plan, involving long-forgotten Vorda abilities and the newly discovered terraforming technology, the sky above them erupted in a dazzling display of light and energy. The Vorda rescue fleet, led by Commander Zirin, executed a daring maneuver, using a disabled Krelthax battlecruiser as cover to bring their ships into low orbit. Dennis watched in awe as the rescue ships began their descent, then frowned as he noticed their erratic movements. Something's wrong, he said, turning to the clone. The ships are struggling to maintain their course. The clone nodded grimly. The planet's magnetic field is collapsing. It's interfering with their navigation systems. Dennis's mind raced, piecing together everything he had learned about the planet, the Vorda technology, and Zara's unique abilities. An idea began to form, crazy and desperate, but possibly their only chance. I think I know how we can get out of this, he said, his voice gaining strength as the plan solidified in his mind. But it's going to take everything we've got. As Dennis outlined his audacious plan to create a stable atmospheric corridor using the terraforming technology and Zara's abilities, the others listened intently. The fate of not just their group, but potentially entire species, hung in the balance. The wild-haired woman, who introduced herself as Asha, spoke up. My hybrids, and I will hold off Zax. We'll buy you the time you need. The clone nodded, already moving to coordinate the various groups. Let's do this. We've got one shot to get it right. As they prepared to put Dennis's plan into action, the ground beneath them shuddered ominously. In the distance, rivers of lava burst from newly formed fissures, and the air grew thick with ash and smoke. The dying planet seemed determined to take them with it, but the combined forces of humans, Vorda, Florens, and their hybrid creation stood ready to fight for their survival. Zara stepped forward, her skin glowing with an inner light as she prepared to channel her unique abilities. Dennis and the clone flanked her, the terraforming device humming to life between them. Zyra and the other ancient Vorda formed a circle around them, their minds linking with Zara's in a powerful telepathic bond. As the rescue ships drew closer, fighting against the planet's magnetic turbulence, Dennis took a deep breath. Everything hinged on what happened next. The air crackled with tension and possibility as they prepared to make their stand against the very forces of nature itself. As Dennis finished outlining his plan, the air crackled with a sudden surge of electromagnetic energy. The terraforming device in their hands sparked and sputtered, its displays flickering erratically. Something's wrong, the clone said, his brow furrowing as he examined the malfunctioning equipment. Dennis's eyes widened as he realized the implications. The electromagnetic storm is intensifying. It's interfering with the terraforming technology. Zara stepped forward, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with an inner light. I can interface directly with the device, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. My Floran biology should allow me to connect physically, while my Vorda mental capabilities can process the atmospheric data. Without hesitation, Zara placed her hands on the terraforming device. Her skin seemed to merge with the machine, tendrils of light spreading across its surface. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity as she began to process the complex atmospheric information. Dennis watched in awe, but his amazement quickly turned to concern as he noticed the strain on Zara's face. Her body trembled with the effort of maintaining the connection, sweat beading on her brow. She can't do this alone, Dennis realized aloud. He turned to the clone. I'm going to link up with her. My human adaptability might help stabilize the connection. The clone nodded grimly. Do it. We're running out of time. Dennis placed his hands on the device next to Zara's. The moment he made contact, he felt a jolt of energy course through his body. His mind expanded, suddenly aware of the swirling atmospheric data that Zara was processing. Together, they formed a bridge between the organic and the technological, their combined efforts amplifying the effectiveness of the atmospheric stabilization process. As Dennis and Zara worked to maintain the corridor, Tila sprang into action. "We need to start the evacuation now," she shouted over the growing roar of the planet's death throes. "Zyra, can your people help organize the groups?" The ancient Vorta nodded, her eyes glowing with telepathic energy. "We will calm their minds and guide them to safety." Tila moved swiftly among the survivors, her voice clear and authoritative as she directed them into groups. "Most vulnerable first," she ordered, gesturing to those carrying children or supporting the injured. "Move quickly but calmly. The ancient Vorta will guide you." As the first groups began to move towards the waiting rescue ships, a series of explosions rocked the perimeter. Asha and her team of feral hybrids fought fiercely against the encroaching Krellfax forces, their unpredictable abilities keeping the enemy at bay. "We need to buy more time," the clone said, his eyes scanning the battlefield. He spotted Commander Zax in the distance, the monstrous figure still rampaging at the edge of the extraction zone. "I have an idea. Kraz, I need your tactical knowledge." The Krellfax deserter joined the clone, and together they quickly formulated a plan. The clone gathered a small team of hybrids with complementary abilities, their unique powers chosen specifically to counter Zax's strengths. "We're going to slow him down," the clone announced. "Asha, hold the perimeter. We'll funnel Zax and any other Krellfax forces into a narrow approach. It'll make them easier targets for your defenders." As the clone's team moved out to confront Zax, the first wave of rescue ships descended through the stabilized corridor. Their engines whined as they fought against the planet's failing magnetic field, but they managed to land safely within the extraction zone. Evacuees streamed onto the ships, guided by the ancient Vorta's telepathic influence. Tila oversaw the loading process, ensuring that critical genetic materials and research data were securely stored alongside the survivors. In orbit, Commander Zirin's voice crackled over the communication channels. "We're facing heavy resistance up here. The Krellfax fleet is trying to block our escape vector. We'll hold them off as long as we can, but you need to hurry." As if in response to Zirin's warning, a hidden Krellfax strike force emerged from the planet's surface, launching a desperate attack on the landed rescue ships. The clone's team, still engaged with Zax, found themselves caught between two threats. "Fall back," the clone shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Use the terrain to funnel them in." The hybrid team retreated strategically, leading both Zax and the Krellfax forces into the narrow approach they had identified earlier. Asha's defenders, now able to concentrate their efforts, unleashed a barrage of hybrid abilities that slowed the enemy advance. Meanwhile, Dennis and Zara's connection to the terraforming device intensified. Their shared consciousness expanded, allowing them to manipulate the atmospheric data with increasing precision. But the strain on their bodies was evident. Dennis's skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality, while Zara's bioluminescence flickered erratically. Tila, noticing their deteriorating condition, felt a pang of worry. "They can't keep this up much longer," she said to Zyra. "We need to get everyone evacuated before they collapse." As if in response to her concerns, the planet shuddered violently. Massive fissures opened in the ground, spewing forth rivers of molten rock. The ancient Vorta, their eyes glowing with power, raised their hands in unison. Shimmering barriers of telekinetic energy sprang into existence, deflecting falling debris and holding back the encroaching lava flows. The first wave of rescue ships, now fully loaded, began to take off. Their engines strained against the planet's dying magnetic field, but the atmospheric corridor held steady, allowing them to ascend safely into orbit. As the ships disappeared into the storm-racked sky, Lyra approached Tila, her eyes wide with excitement despite the chaos around them. "I've made a breakthrough with the genetic data from the ancient Vorta archive," she said breathlessly. "There's a sequence here that could enhance Dennis and Zara's ability to interface with the terraforming technology. But," she hesitated, her excitement faltering, "applying it in their current state is risky. We don't know how it might affect them." Tila looked from Lyra to Dennis and Zara, their bodies trembling with the effort of maintaining the atmospheric corridor. The second wave of rescue ships was descending, but there were still hundreds of survivors waiting to be evacuated. The clone and Asha's forces were barely holding back the combined threat of Zack's and the Krulthak strike team. Time was running out, and a difficult decision loomed. The fate of the remaining evacuees, the future of the breeding program, and possibly the survival of multiple species hung in the balance. As Tila weighed their options, the ground beneath them shook once more, a stark reminder of the planet's imminent demise. Destruction. Tila's eyes darted between Dennis and Zara, their bodies trembling with effort, and Lyra's hopeful expression. The weight of the decision pressed down on her like the planet's collapsing atmosphere. "Do it," she said firmly, nodding to Lyra. "We're out of options." Lyra sprang into action, her hands steady as she prepared the genetic material. Using equipment salvaged from the rescue ships, she synthesized the modification into an injectable form with remarkable speed. "This will hurt," Lyra warned as she approached Dennis and Zara with the syringes. "But it should enhance your connection to the terraforming device." Dennis gritted his teeth, his eyes meeting Zara's. They nodded in unison, bracing themselves. Lyra administered the injection swiftly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Dennis and Zara's bodies convulsed, their skin taking on a faint luminescence. They cried out in pain, their backs arching as the genetic modification took hold. Tila watched in horror and fascination as their bodies transformed. Dennis's skin became almost translucent, pulsing with an inner light. Zara's bioluminescence intensified, patterns of light dancing across her skin in complex, mesmerizing patterns. Their connection to the terraforming equipment strengthened visibly. The atmospheric corridor expanded, its boundaries pushing outward like a bubble inflating. The rescue ships, which had been struggling against the planet's magnetic turbulence, suddenly found themselves in a pocket of calm. "It's working," the clone shouted, his eyes on the sky. "The corridor is stable. We can bring in more ships." As if in response, a new wave of rescue vessels descended through the widened corridor. Their engines hummed smoothly, no longer fighting against electromagnetic interference. But the success came at a cost. Dennis and Zara's faces contorted in agony, their bodies shaking with the strain of maintaining the expanded corridor. Sweat poured down their faces, and their breathing became labored. Tila moved closer, monitoring their vital signs with growing concern. "We need to get them out of here soon," she said to Lyra. "I don't know how long they can keep this up." The evacuation accelerated, with Zyra and the ancient Vorta coordinating the loading process. They used their telekinetic abilities to create floating platforms from debris, ferrying groups of survivors across the increasingly treacherous terrain. "We're moving faster, but we're not out of danger yet," the clone warned, his eyes on the horizon. Commander Zax's massive form loomed in the distance, still held at bay by the hybrid defense team. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Massive fissures opened up, spewing forth rivers of molten rock. The heat was intense, causing some of the rescue ship systems to malfunction. "We need to divert those lava flows," the clone shouted, organizing teams to use the Vorta terraforming technology. They worked frantically, creating barriers and channels to redirect the molten rock away from the evacuation site. As the clone coordinated the lava diversion efforts, a group of Krulthak soldiers broke through the defensive line. Asha led a counterattack, her feral hybrids engaging the enemy in close combat. In the midst of the chaos, one of the hybrids, Kala, unleashed an unexpected ability. Under the stress of battle, she emitted a powerful electromagnetic pulse that disabled the Krelfax energy weapons. "Push them back!" Asha roared, seizing the advantage. The hybrid team surged forward, driving the Krelfax away from the extraction zone. With the immediate threat neutralized, attention turned to the looming presence of Commander Zax. The monstrous hybrid continued his relentless advance, his enhanced abilities making him nearly unstoppable. The clone's eyes narrowed as he formulated a plan. "Kala, you're with me," he ordered. "We're going to take on Zax directly." As the clone led his small team to confront Zax, Dennis and Zara's condition worsened. Their bodies began to merge with the terraforming equipment, flesh intertwining with metal and circuitry. Tila watched in horror as their individual features began to blur. Their movements synchronized, their breathing patterns aligned. It was as if their very identities were melding together. "We need to disconnect them," Tila said urgently to Lyra. "If we wait much longer, we might not be able to separate them from the machine." But as Tila reached for the equipment, the ground shook again. A massive volcanic eruption sent a wall of superheated gas rushing towards the evacuation site. The ancient Vorta raised their hands in unison, creating a shimmering barrier of telekinetic energy to hold back the deadly cloud. In orbit, Commander Zirin's voice crackled over the communication channels. "We're detecting massive tectonic instability. The planet's core is becoming critically unstable. You need to complete the evacuation now." The final rescue ships descended through the atmospheric corridor, touching down on the increasingly unstable ground. As the last groups of survivors were loaded, the clones' team engaged Zax in a desperate battle near one of the lava flows. Tila stood frozen, her hand hovering over the terraforming equipment. Dennis and Zara's merged form pulsed with energy, maintaining the atmospheric corridor that was their only hope of escape. But with each passing moment, they seemed to lose more of themselves to the machine. The fate of the entire evacuation, the breeding program, and countless lives hung in the balance. As the planet entered its final death throes, Tila faced an impossible choice: risk separating Dennis and Zara from the equipment and potentially doom them all, or leave them connected and watch as they lost their humanity to save everyone else. The air crackled with tension as Tila's hand trembled, poised to make a decision that would shape the future of multiple species. The story of survival and sacrifice on this dying world was not nearly finished, with challenges and impossible choices still lying ahead. Tila's hand hovered over the terraforming equipment, her mind racing with the implications of her decision. The ground shook violently, reminding her of the planet's imminent demise. In that moment of hesitation, the clone's voice crackled over the communication channel. "We have a plan," he announced, his voice strained with exertion. "Kala's discovered a new ability. We're going to use it against Zax." Tila's eyes widened, hope flickering in her chest. "Understood. We'll hold position here." She watched as the clone's team engaged Zax near the lava flows. Kala, her face contorted with concentration, unleashed a powerful electromagnetic pulse. The energy rippled through the air, striking Zax's massive form. The effect was immediate. Zax stumbled, his enhanced biological systems disrupted by the pulse. The clone seized the opportunity, leading a coordinated assault that drove Zax toward an unstable section of terrain. The ground beneath Zax's feet suddenly gave way. With a roar of rage and surprise, the monstrous hybrid plummeted into a deep fissure filled with molten lava. The extreme heat and pressure proved too much even for his enhanced physiology. Zax's form disappeared beneath the glowing surface, his threat finally neutralized. As the clone and his team retreated to the extraction zone, Tila refocused on Dennis and Zara. Their merged form pulsed with energy, maintaining the atmospheric corridor. But their individual features had blurred further, their bodies now deeply intertwined with the machinery. "We need to act now," Lyra urged, her eyes darting between Dennis and Zara and the approaching rescue ships. I have an idea, but it's risky. Tila nodded, her mind focused. Do it. Lyra's hands moved with practiced efficiency, synthesizing a new genetic compound. This should stabilize their hyperphysiology, she explained, preparing 2 syringes. Zyra stepped forward, her ancient eyes glowing with power. I will guide the compound's integration, she said, her voice resonating with authority. As Lyra administered the injections, Zyra placed her hands on Dennis and Zara's merged form. The air around them shimmered with telepathic energy. Dennis and Zara's bodies began to shift and adapt, partially separating from the terraforming equipment while retaining some of its functions. Their eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner light. Dennis gasped, his voice overlapping with Zara's. We can see everything. Their mental link intensified, memories and emotions flooding between them. Individual consciousnesses merged and separated in rapid succession, creating a unique shared experience. As Dennis and Zara stabilized, the final phase of the evacuation began. Asha oversaw the loading of critical genetic materials and research data, ensuring the core components of the breeding program were preserved. The last rescue ship touched down as a series of massive earthquakes rocked the extraction zone. The planet's surface began to break apart, huge sections of land sinking into the unstable core. We need to go now, the clone shouted, ushering the remaining survivors onto the ship. The rescue ship's engines strained against the planet's fluctuating gravity, struggling to achieve liftoff. Dennis and Zara, still partially connected to the terraforming equipment, channeled their combined abilities. A brief anti-gravity field formed around the extraction zone, reducing the gravitational pull just enough for the ships to break free. As the rescue fleet raced to escape the deteriorating atmosphere, Commander Zirin's voice crackled over the comms. Incoming Krelfax blockade. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. The fleet dispersed, using the planet's erratic electromagnetic emissions to mask their signatures. Rescue ships weaved through the Krelfax formation, narrowly avoiding enemy fire and collision with debris. Suddenly, an unexpected transmission cut through the chaos. A group of Krelfax ships broke formation, moving to intercept the rescue fleet. But instead of attacking, their commander hailed the Vorta command ship. This is Commander Vexer, a gravelly voice announced. We wish to defect. Not all Krelfax agree with our species' aggressive expansion. The clone, now aboard the command ship, exchanged glances with Tila. It could be a trap, he warned. Or it could be our best chance of survival, Tila countered. She opened a channel to Vexer. Prove your intentions. Cover our escape. Vexer's ships moved into defensive positions, engaging the pursuing Krelfax forces. The rescue fleet pushed onward, reaching the edge of the system. As they prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel, attention turned to Dennis and Zara. Their bodies, now a hybrid of organic matter and advanced technology, pulsed with energy. Lyra and the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize their condition. Dennis opened his eyes, his gaze meeting Zara's. We're still connected, he whispered, his voice tinged with wonder and uncertainty. Zara nodded, her bioluminescence flickering in complex patterns. But we're also more. As the rescue fleet prepared to make the jump, the future of the breeding program hung in the balance. With its participants scattered across multiple ships and its key subjects irrevocably changed, new challenges and possibilities loomed on the horizon. The command ship's engines hummed, preparing for the leap into the unknown. The story of survival, sacrifice, and evolution was not nearly finished, with the next chapter waiting to unfold among the stars. Stars beyond. The moment of triumph was short-lived, however, as a new crisis emerged. Alarms blared across the command ship's bridge. Engineers scrambled to diagnose the problem as the FTL drive sputtered and failed to engage. What's happening? Tila demanded, her eyes darting between holographic displays. A young Vorta technician's voice cracked with stress as he responded. "We're detecting an unusual energy signature interfering with the FDL drives. It's coming from Dennis and Zara." All eyes turned to the hybrid pair. Their bodies, still partially merged with the terraforming technology, pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Tendrils of energy arced between them and the ship's systems, creating a feedback loop that disrupted the delicate FDL mechanics. Lyra pushed through the crowd, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to analyze their condition immediately. Bring them to the medical bay." As the team carefully transported Dennis and Zara, Commander Vexer's gravelly voice crackled over the comms. "Vorta Command Ship, this is Vexer. We're detecting increased Krellthax activity. What's your status?" The clone took charge, his genetically enhanced mind rapidly assessing the situation. "We're experiencing technical difficulties, Vexer. Can you buy us some time?" "Affirmative. We'll engage the pursuit force." Through the viewports, the defecting Krellthax ships moved into defensive formations. Energy weapons flared to life as they engaged their former comrades, creating a barrier of light and destruction between the rescue fleet and their pursuers. In the medical bay, Lyra worked feverishly alongside a mixed team of human and Vorta scientists. Holographic displays flickered with data as they analyzed Dennis and Zara's unique physiology. "The terraforming technology is trying to stabilize itself within their organic systems," Lyra explained, her fingers dancing across a control panel. "It's creating a unique energy signature as a byproduct." Tila leaned in, her brow furrowed. "Can we stop it?" Lyra shook her head, not without risking severe damage to their hybrid forms. But her eyes lit up with a dangerous idea. "We might be able to harness this energy to enhance our FDL capabilities." "How?" Tila asked, sensing the weight of Lyra's hesitation. Lyra took a deep breath. "We need to fully integrate Dennis and Zara with the ship systems. Their hybrid nature could act as a bridge between the organic and technological, potentially allowing for unprecedented control over the FDL drive." As they debated the ethical implications of this plan, chaos erupted in another section of the ship. The feral hybrids, rescued during the frantic evacuation, began to lose control of their volatile abilities. Bursts of uncontrolled energy scorched bulkheads and overloaded systems. Asha fought her way through the pandemonium, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to dodge arcs of wild energy. She reached the bridge, her eyes wild with urgency. "We need to stabilize the ferals before they tear the ship apart," she gasped, catching her breath. "I have an idea, but it's risky." The clone nodded, gesturing for her to continue. "The pheromone weapons," Asha explained. "We can modify them, create a stabilizing compound. It might bring the ferals under control." With no time to waste, the plan was put into action. Asha worked with a team to synthesize the modified pheromones while security personnel corralled the unstable hybrids into containment areas. As the situation with the ferals unfolded, Lyra's team made a breakthrough with Dennis and Zara. They successfully established a preliminary interface between the hybrid pair and the ship systems. Dennis gasped as his consciousness expanded, suddenly aware of every circuit and conduit throughout the vessel. Zara's bioluminescence pulsed in sync with the ship's power core. "It's incredible," Dennis breathed, his voice overlapping with Zara's. "We can feel the ship, all of it." Lyra monitored their vital signs closely. "How do you feel? Any discomfort?" "No discomfort," Zara replied, her eyes unfocused as she processed the new sensations. "But it's overwhelming. Our thoughts, they're starting to blend with the ship's AI." Tila's concern deepened. Is there a way to preserve their individual identities? Before Lyra could respond, Zyra, the ancient Vorta specimen, approached. Her eyes glowed with an inner light as she spoke. "I sense something A signal, faint but unmistakable. The clone turned to her, intrigued. What kind of signal? Zyra's voice took on a reverent tone. A beacon, left by an ancient Vorta expedition. It holds secrets, advanced breeding techniques, technologies we've long forgotten. The revelation sent shockwaves through the command staff. The potential knowledge contained in that beacon could revolutionize their entire mission. But investigating would mean delaying their escape, risking further confrontation with the Krelfax. As the leadership debated their next move, Asha's team deployed the modified pheromones among the feral hybrids. The effect was immediate and surprising. Not only did the ferals stabilize, but their abilities seemed to align with the ship's functions in unexpected ways. One feral, his skin crackling with bioelectrical energy, found himself able to interface directly with the power distribution systems. Another, whose body constantly shifted and adapted, melded seamlessly with the ship's structural integrity field. Asha watched in amazement as the ferals transformed from liabilities into valuable assets. "They're becoming a hybrid crew," she murmured, "perfectly adapted to this ship." The clone made his decision. "We'll send a small team to investigate the beacon. The main fleet will continue on to safety." A specialized expedition was quickly assembled. The clone would lead, accompanied by Zyra and a select group of human Vorta hybrids. They boarded a scout ship modified with cloaking technology reverse-engineered from Vexor's vessels. As the expedition prepared to depart, Dennis and Zara's integration with the main ship reached a critical phase. Their consciousnesses expanded to encompass the entire vessel, granting them unprecedented control over its systems. Lyra's voice was tight with concern as she reported to Tila. "The integration is boosting our FTL capabilities beyond anything we've seen, but their individual personalities. They're fragmenting memories, identities. It's all blending with the ship's AI." Tila's eyes sharp. "Find a way to preserve who they are. We can't lose them to this process." As the scout ship detached from the main fleet, the FTL drives hummed to life. Dennis and Zara's merged consciousness trembled with the strain of guiding the massive fleet through subspace. Their perception shifted, the fabric of space-time unfolding before them in ways no organic mind had ever experienced. With exquisite precision, they navigated the fleet through the treacherous corridors of subspace. The main fleet vanished in a burst of light, leaving the small expedition ship alone in the vastness of space. As they set course for the ancient beacon, the clone gazed out at the star-filled void, knowing that the next phase of their journey would shape the future of multiple species. The rescue fleet streaked through subspace, its course guided by the hybrid consciousness of Dennis and Zara. Meanwhile, the expedition ship slipped silently towards a mysterious Vorta beacon, carrying with it the hopes of uncovering knowledge that could change everything. The story of survival, adaptation, and the blurring lines between organic and artificial life continued to unfold among the stars. The rescue fleet streaked through subspace, its course guided by the hybrid consciousness of Dennis and Zara. Meanwhile, the expedition ship slipped silently towards a mysterious Vorta beacon, carrying with it the hopes of uncovering knowledge that could change everything. As the main fleet continued its FTL journey, the expedition team led by the clone approached the coordinates of the ancient Vorta beacon. The small scout ship emerged from subspace, its sensors immediately detecting an anomaly. "There," Zyra pointed, her eyes fixed on the screen. "A space station." The clone leaned forward, studying the structure. It hung in orbit around a desolate planet, its design unlike anything they had encountered before. Despite its apparent age, the station seemed remarkably intact. "Scan for life signs," the clone ordered. A young hybrid technician shook his head. "None detected. Sir, the station appears to be abandoned." With practiced efficiency, the team docked their scout ship and prepared to board the station. The clone led the way, his enhanced senses on high alert as they stepped into the airlock. The station's interior was a marvel of preservation. Smooth, curved walls gleamed under the glow of emergency lighting that had somehow endured for centuries. The air was stale but breathable, carrying the faint scent of long-dormant machinery. "This way," Zyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. She moved with purpose, as if drawn by an unseen force. They found the main control room, its banks of consoles still operational. The clone's fingers danced across the alien interface, bringing systems online one by one. "It's a database," he announced, his eyes widening as he processed the information. "Vorta genetic research, breeding techniques. This is beyond anything we've ever seen." Zyra joined him, her ancient knowledge complementing his enhanced abilities as they worked to download and analyze the data. The rest of the team spread out, securing the station and searching for any additional information. Back on the main fleet, alarms blared through the command ship. Tila rushed to the medical bay, where Lyra hunched over a console, her face etched with concern. "What's happening?" Tila demanded. Lyra's voice was tight. "Dennis and Zar's neural patterns are destabilizing. The strain of guiding the fleet through FTL. It's fragmenting their merged consciousness." On the adjacent beds, Dennis and Zar arrived, their bodies pulsing with erratic energy. The ship around them shuddered, the FTL drive faltering as its hybrid pilots lost coherence. Tila's mind raced. "We need a solution now." Lyra nodded, her fingers flying across the console. "I have an idea. It's experimental, combining Vorta telepathic techniques with human neuroplasticity theories. We can create an interface to stabilize their neural patterns while maintaining their connection to the ship." "Do it," Tila ordered. The procedure was a delicate dance of technology and biology. Vorta scientists channeled their telepathic abilities through specialized equipment, while human neuroscientists monitored the intricate web of synaptic connections. For hours, the medical bay hummed with tense activity. Finally, Dennis gasped, his eyes flying open. Beside him, Zara's bioluminescence pulsed in a steady rhythm. We're still here," Dennis said, his voice filled with wonder. Zara nodded, her gaze distant. "But we're more, so much more." Lyra's scans confirmed what they were experiencing. The procedure had not only stabilized their neural patterns, but enhanced their cognitive abilities beyond any previous limits. They processed vast amounts of data in microseconds, making complex calculations that even the most advanced AIs would struggle with. "The FTL drive," Tila said, hope rising in her voice. "Can you optimize it?" Dennis and Zara answered in unison, their voices overlapping in perfect harmony. "Already done. We've reduced our journey time by 47%. As the fleet surged forward with renewed speed and efficiency, the expedition team at the Vorta beacon made another startling discovery. "Look at this," the clone called out, his voice echoing through the station's chambers. He pointed to a section of the genetic database that seemed older than the rest. Zyra leaned in, her eyes widening. A third species. Allies of the ancient Vorta. The clone nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "The Zen. It says they were master bioengineers. If we could find them..." A sudden beep from their communication devices interrupted his thought. One of the team members, who had been scouting the planet below, called in with urgency. "Sir, we've detected a weak signal from the surface. It looks like a distress beacon." The clone exchanged a glance with Zyra. The risks were significant, but the potential rewards. "Prepare a landing party," he ordered. "We're going down there." As they descended to the planet's barren surface, the main fleet approached a new star system, its sensors detecting a habitable planet. But before they could celebrate, a web of energy lit up the space around them. Automated defense network, Dennis announced, his voice echoing through the ship's systems. Ancient, powerful. Zara's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. We're deciphering its algorithms. Complex, but not impenetrable. As Dennis and Zara worked to neutralize the threat, Asha coordinated with her team of stabilized feral hybrids. They interfaced with various ship systems, enhancing shields, weapons, and navigation. On the planet's surface, the clone led his team through a landscape of crumbling ruins. They followed the faint signal to its source, a partially buried structure that might once have been a research facility. Inside, they found a single stasis pod, its systems barely functional after millennia of operation. The clone carefully initiated the revival sequence, his heart pounding with anticipation. The pod hissed open, revealing a humanoid figure. As the mist cleared, they saw her, slender, with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. "Welcome back," the clone said softly as her eyes fluttered open. "I'm afraid you've been asleep for a very long time." The Zen female blinked, taking in her surroundings. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "I am Alara," she said, "last of the Zen. And you are the ones we've been waiting for." As Alara began to share her story, the clone knew that their mission and the future of the breeding program had just entered a new and extraordinary phase. The clone's mind raced with possibilities as he absorbed Alara's words. Before he could respond, his communicator chirped urgently. "Sir, we've established a stable orbit around the planet," reported the fleet's navigation officer. "Preliminary scans indicate favorable conditions for settlement." "Understood," the clone replied. "Prepare for our return. We have much to discuss." As the expedition team's ship docked with the main fleet, a palpable sense of excitement rippled through the assembled crowd. Alara stepped onto the deck, her iridescent skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Murmurs of awe swept through the onlookers as they beheld the last of the Zen. Tila approached, extending a hand in greeting. "Welcome aboard. I'm Tila, head of our medical division." Alara inclined her head gracefully. "The pleasure is mine. Your achievements in genetic manipulation are intriguing." As introductions were made, Dennis and Zara's voices resonated through the ship's communication system. "We've completed a comprehensive planetary scan," they announced in unison. "Multiple viable settlement sites identified. Transmitting data now." The clone nodded, his enhanced mind already processing the information. "Excellent work. Lyra, assemble the science team. We need to begin analyzing this data immediately." In the days that followed, the fleet buzzed with activity. Alara, working alongside Lyra and the scientific team, set up a temporary laboratory on the main ship. The air hummed with the whir of advanced equipment as they combined their diverse expertise. "Fascinating," Alara murmured, her eyes fixed on a holographic display of gene sequences. "Your Vorta techniques, when combined with Zen bioengineering principles, could yield unprecedented results." Lyra leaned in, her brow furrowed in concentration. "If we apply this to our existing hybrid templates—" "Precisely," Alara finished. "We could create a new generation of colonists specifically adapted to thrive in this planet's ecosystem." As word of their progress spread, the clone called a meeting of the fleet's leadership. The command center was filled with a mix of humans, Vorta, and hybrids, all eager to hear the latest developments. "We stand at a crossroads," the clone began, his voice carrying the weight of their shared journey. "The knowledge we've gained from the Vorta beacon, combined with Alara's expertise, offers us a unique opportunity. I propose we implement an accelerated breeding program, focused on creating hybrids tailored for our new home." The room erupted in a flurry of voices. Some expressed enthusiasm, while others urged caution. "We can't rush into this," argued a human scientist. The long-term effects of such rapid genetic manipulation are unknown. A Vorta commander countered, "Our very survival may depend on swift adaptation. We must seize this chance." As the debate raged on, Asha and her team of stabilized feral hybrids were already preparing for the next phase of their mission. In the hangar bay, they worked tirelessly to modify several shuttles with newly developed hybrid interface systems. "These babies will give us unprecedented maneuverability for surface recon," Asha explained to a group of eager pilots. Her skin crackled with bioelectrical energy as she interfaced with the shuttle systems, demonstrating its capabilities. Meanwhile, Tila and her medical team faced a different challenge. In a specialized treatment room, Dennis and Zara lay motionless, their bodies still integrated with the ship systems. "We need to separate them soon," Tila said, her voice tight with concern. "Their cognitive functions are stable for now, but prolonged integration could have unforeseen consequences." The team worked around the clock, developing a biomechanical interface that would allow Dennis and Zara to maintain their enhanced abilities while regaining physical autonomy. It was a delicate balance of organic and synthetic components, pushing the boundaries of their medical knowledge. As preparations continued, the first wave of scout missions launched towards the planet's surface. The modified shuttles streaked through the atmosphere, their hybrid pilots interfacing directly with the craft systems for precise control. On the ground, the scout teams moved with practiced efficiency, collecting samples of the planet's flora and fauna. The alien landscape was a riot of colors and strange forms, bioluminescent plants pulsing with otherworldly light. "Team Alpha to base," a scout reported, her voice tinged with excitement. "We've discovered something unusual. Sending visuals now." The transmitted images showed crumbling structures of an unmistakably artificial origin. Intricate patterns adorned weathered stone, bearing a striking resemblance to the designs found on the Vorta beacon. Back on the fleet, the clone studied the images with intense focus. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We're not just colonizing a planet. We're uncovering a piece of our shared history." As the implications of this discovery rippled through the fleet, Ilara approached the clone with a new proposal. Her eyes shimmered with the promise of scientific breakthrough. "I believe we can take our hybrid development even further," she explained. "By combining Zen bioengineering with advanced Vorta breeding techniques, we could create a class of hybrids capable of rapid environmental adaptation. They would be the perfect pioneers for our new world." The clone's enhanced mind quickly grasped the potential of Ilara's idea. "Assemble a team," he ordered. "We'll need volunteers from all our species for the initial trials." As word spread of this new initiative, a diverse group of humans, Vorta, and existing hybrids stepped forward, ready to participate in the next phase of their shared evolution. With plans taking shape, the fleet's leadership finalized the details for their planetfall. They selected a landing site near one of the ancient ruins, hoping to uncover valuable resources or technologies left behind by the previous civilization. In the medical bay, Dennis and Zara underwent the separation procedure. Hours of tense work passed as the medical team carefully disconnected them from the ship systems and integrated the new biomechanical interfaces. Finally, Dennis gasped, his eyes flying open. Beside him, Zara's bioluminescence pulsed with renewed vigor. They looked at each other, then at their hands, marveling at the seamless blend of biology and technology that now allowed them to interface with machines at will. "How do you feel?" Tila asked, her face etched with concern and hope. Dennis flexed his fingers, watching as holographic displays sprang to life around him. "Connected," he said, "but ourselves again." Zara nodded, her eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. "We're ready for the next phase." As the first wave of colonists prepared for planetfall, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy filled the landing ships. The clone stood at the forefront with Ilara, Dennis, Zara, and a carefully selected group of humans, Vorta, and hybrids at his side. The ships descended through the planet's atmosphere, revealing a landscape both alien and breathtaking. Vast forests of bioluminescent vegetation stretched to the horizon, interrupted by towering rock formations that seemed to defy gravity. As they touched down in a clearing near the ruins, the colonists took their first steps onto the soil of their new home. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and a chorus of alien wildlife echoed in the distance. The clone surveyed the group, his enhanced senses alert for any signs of distress. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice calm and resolute. "We have a world to explore and a future to build." As the colonists began setting up their base camp, Ilera and her team prepared to initiate the new hybrid breeding program. The ancient ruins loomed nearby, a constant reminder of the planet's mysterious past and the challenges that lay ahead. The first chapter of their new life on this alien world had begun, but countless questions remained unanswered. What secrets did the ruins hold? How would their new hybrid offspring adapt to this environment? And what unseen dangers might be lurking beyond the horizon? As the twin suns began to set, casting an otherworldly glow across the landscape, the colonists steeled themselves for the trials and discoveries that awaited them in the days to come. "Come." The clone surveyed the bustling activity around him, his enhanced senses picking up every detail of their new alien home. "Dennis, Zara," he called, gesturing to the newly liberated duo. "I need you to lead a team into those ruins. Your biomechanical implants might give us an edge in understanding what we're dealing with." Dennis nodded, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and grit. "We're on it. Zara, let's assemble a team." As Dennis and Zara gathered a group of skilled individuals, Ilera approached the clone, her iridescent skin shimmering in the alien twilight. "I've identified a suitable location for our new laboratory," she said, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. "We need to begin the hybrid breeding program immediately if we're to adapt to this world." The clone agreed, and soon the camp was a hive of activity. Construction crews worked tirelessly to erect temporary structures, while Ilera's team set up a state-of-the-art genetic manipulation facility. Meanwhile, Dennis and Zara led their exploration team towards the nearby ruins. As they approached, the crumbling structures seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "Everyone stay alert," Dennis warned, his implants scanning the area for potential threats. Zara placed her hand on a weathered wall, her bioluminescence flickering rapidly. "I'm detecting residual energy signatures. This place, it's not as dead as it looks." As they ventured deeper into the ruins, Dennis and Zara's implants began to interface with hidden systems. Holographic displays flickered to life, filling the air with streams of alien data. "This is incredible," Zara breathed, her eyes darting from one display to another. "It's a complete historical archive of this planet." Dennis nodded, his own implants processing the information at lightning speed. "And not just that. There are schematics here, technological blueprints far beyond anything we've seen before." Back at the base camp, Ilera's laboratory hummed with activity. Volunteers from all species lined up, ready to participate in the first phase of genetic modification. "Remember," Ilera explained to the first group, "this process will enhance your ability to withstand this planet's unique atmosphere and adapt to its gravity. It's a crucial step in our survival here." As the genetic treatments began, the clone organized scouting parties to map the surrounding area. Asha, leading a team of stabilized feral hybrids, ventured into the alien wilderness. The landscape was a riot of bioluminescent flora, pulsing with vibrant colors. Strange creatures scurried through the underbrush, their forms defying easy classification. "Look at this," one of Asha's team called out, pointing to a cluster of fruit-like growths. "Potential food source?" Asha approached cautiously, her enhanced senses analyzing the unknown flora. "Possibly. We'll take samples back for analysis. Remember, nothing goes in our mouths until it's been thoroughly tested." As the day wore on, the scouting parties returned with a wealth of samples and data. The clone pored over their reports, his enhanced mind rapidly processing the information. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the edge of the camp. One of the scouting parties had returned early, their faces etched with excitement and trepidation. "Sir," the team leader reported, breathless, "we've found something. An underground complex, hidden near the ruins. It's still powered." The clone's eyes narrowed. This could be the breakthrough they needed. "Assemble a specialized team," he ordered. "Dennis, Zara, Ilera, I want you all on this." Within hours, the team stood at the entrance to the hidden complex, its opening barely visible beneath a tangle of bioluminescent vines. Dennis and Zara stepped forward, their implants interfacing with the ancient security systems. With a low hum, the entrance slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with advanced technology. Holographic displays sprang to life as they entered, responding to the presence of Dennis and Zara's implants. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined," Ilera whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the sight. As Dennis and Zara delved deeper into the complex's systems, decrypting data and unlocking secrets, Ilera discovered something that made her heart race. In a sealed chamber, she found biological samples with familiar genetic markers. This is Zen DNA," she exclaimed. "But it's been modified, integrated with the indigenous life forms of this planet." The implications were staggering. Had this world once been a Zen colony, an experimental outpost? Before they could fully process this revelation, Dennis called out from across the chamber, "I've found something, a message, left behind by whoever was here last." A holographic figure flickered to life, its features a haunting blend of Zen and something other. Its voice echoed through the chamber, carrying a warning that chilled them to the bone. "To those who follow, heed our words. This world is not what it seems. Every few centuries, it undergoes a massive transformation. Oceans become deserts, mountains crumble to dust, and the very air turns toxic. We could not survive the change. Perhaps you can succeed where we failed. The next cycle begins in 1 year's time. Prepare yourselves." As the message faded, the team stood in stunned silence. The clone was the first to speak, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "We have work to do. Dennis, Zura, I need you to integrate this technology with our systems. Ilera, use this new genetic information in your breeding program. We need to be ready for whatever this planet throws at us." As they emerged from the complex, the alien sky darkened with storm clouds. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the strange landscape. The colony faced a race against time, their very survival hanging in the balance. In the coming days, the base camp transformed into a hive of frenzied activity. Construction teams worked around the clock, reinforcing existing structures and breaking ground on new, more permanent dwellings. The sound of machinery mingled with the alien calls of the planet's wildlife, creating a cacophony that never seemed to cease. Dennis and Zara, their implants now interface with the ancient technology, became the cornerstone of the colony's technological advancement. They worked tirelessly, their enhanced cognitive abilities allowing them to process and implement the newfound knowledge at an astonishing rate. "We're making progress," Dennis reported to the clone, his eyes flickering with streams of data. "The environmental control systems from the complex are far more advanced than anything we had. With some modifications, we might be able to create protective bubbles around our main structures." Zara nodded in agreement, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "And the predictive models we're developing. They're giving us a clearer picture of what to expect when the planetary event begins. It's not pretty, but at least we won't be going in blind." Meanwhile, Ilera's laboratory had become the beating heart of the colony's adaptation efforts. The first batch of genetically modified colonists had emerged from treatment, their bodies already showing signs of accelerated adaptation to the alien environment. The results are promising, Alara explained to a group of anxious volunteers awaiting their turn. Those who've undergone the procedure are showing increased resistance to the atmospheric toxins and improved cardiovascular performance under the planet's gravitational conditions. But Alara's mind was already racing ahead, grappling with the implications of the Zen genetic material she discovered. In the privacy of her personal lab, she began work on what she called the Superhybrid Project, a bold attempt to create individuals capable of not just surviving, but thriving in the extreme conditions to come. As the colony's preparations intensified, the clone found himself constantly on the move, overseeing every aspect of their survival strategy. He stood now at the edge of the expanding camp, watching as excavation teams broke ground for a new underground shelter. How soon can we have this operational? He asked the project lead, a human Vorta hybrid whose skin had already begun to take on a faint bioluminescent glow, a sign of successful adaptation. At our current pace, we should have the main chamber complete within 2 months, the hybrid responded. But, sir, there's something else you should see. The clone followed the hybrid to a nearby excavation site. There, partially unearthed, was a massive piece of machinery, its purpose unclear but its alien origin unmistakable. It seems the underground complex extends far beyond what we initially discovered, the hybrid explained. We're finding technology integrated into the very bedrock of this planet. The clone's mind raced with the possibilities. Could this machinery be part of the planetary transformation process? Or was it a relic of some ancient attempt to control it? Before he could ponder further, his communication device chimed urgently. It was Asha, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Sir, you need to come to the lab immediately. Alara's first batch of superhybrids. They're waking up. The clone cast one last look at the excavation site before turning back towards the heart of the colony. With each passing day, the mysteries of their new home deepened, even as the clock ticked relentlessly towards the coming cataclysm. The next phase of their journey was about to begin, and the fate of the colony hung in the balance. Balance. The clone's enhanced mind was already formulating strategies, weighing options, and calculating probabilities as he strode purposefully towards Alara's lab. As he entered, the air hummed with an electric tension. Alara stood before a row of translucent pods, each containing a figure that was unmistakably different from any of the colonists. Their skin shimmered with a subtle iridescence, muscles rippling beneath as they stirred to consciousness. They're perfect, Alara breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of pride and awe. The genetic integration was more successful than I could have hoped. The clone approached the nearest pod, studying the being within. How soon can they be ready for integration into the colony? Before Alara could answer, the pod's occupant opened her eyes. They were a startling violet, filled with an intelligence that seemed beyond human. With a smooth motion, she pressed her hand against the pod's interior, and it opened with a soft hiss. "We are ready now," she said, her voice melodious yet firm. "I am Lyria." In the days that followed, Lyria and her fellow superhybrids proved to be invaluable assets to the colony. Their enhanced strength and resilience allowed them to take on tasks that would have been impossible for others. Lyria, in particular, showed an aptitude for leadership that the clone was quick to utilize. As Lyria coordinated the expansion of the underground complex, Dennis and Zara made a breakthrough that would change the course of the colony's future. Deep within the ancient systems, they discovered a dormant environmental control network. "It's incredible," Dennis explained, his eyes flickering with streams of data as he interfaced with the system. "With some modifications, we could potentially mitigate the worst effects of the planetary event." Zara nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "The only problem is, our implants are having trouble fully integrating with the system. It's like there's a missing piece." Their answer came in an unexpected form. As Lyria's team worked to excavate new chambers, They stumbled upon a section of the complex that seemed to respond to their presence. Panels lit up and doors slid open at their approach. It's responding to their genetic makeup, Ilara realized, her mind racing with the implications. The superhybrids are the key to unlocking the full potential of this technology. With this discovery, the pace of progress accelerated dramatically. Lyria and her team, working in tandem with Dennis and Zara, began to unlock secrets that had lain dormant for millennia. The environmental control system slowly came to life, its influence spreading throughout the expanded complex. But as the colony's technological capabilities grew, so did the challenges they faced. The planet seemed to rebel against their presence, unleashing storms of increasing ferocity. The sky darkened with roiling clouds, and winds howled with an almost sentient fury. "We need to move everyone underground," the clone ordered, watching as lightning split the sky with unnatural colors. "The surface is becoming too dangerous." As the colonists retreated into the relative safety of the underground complex, Ilara approached the clone with a radical proposal. "We need to accelerate our adaptation," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "I believe we can use the ancient gestation chambers we've discovered to create a new generation of hybrids, specifically designed for post-event conditions." The clone considered her words carefully, weighing the ethical implications against the colony's dire need. After consulting with Dennis and Zara, he gave his approval. "Do it," he said, "but be cautious. We're treading in unknown territory." As Ilara set to work, establishing a dedicated hybrid gestation facility in the heart of the complex, Dennis and Zara made another startling discovery. Hidden behind layers of security protocols and physical barriers, they found a chamber unlike any other. "Sir, you need to see this," Dennis called, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The clone entered the chamber, and for a moment, even his enhanced mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Row upon row of cryogenic pods lined the walls, each containing a being that was unmistakably Zen, yet different. They were clearly adapted to the planet's unique conditions. Their forms a perfect blend of Zen and something distinctly alien. "They're the original inhabitants," Zara whispered, her bioluminescence flickering rapidly. "They must have put themselves in stasis when they realized they couldn't survive the planetary event." The discovery of these preserved specimens presented a moral quandary that threatened to divide the colony. Ilara saw the potential to incorporate this pure, adapted Zen genetic material into her hybrid program. Others argued for reviving the ancient Zen, seeing it as their duty to preserve a lost civilization. As debates raged and preparations continued, the first tremors of the planetary event began to shake the colony. The environmental control system strained against the onslaught, its newly awakened circuits pulsing with energy as it fought to maintain stability. Lyria and her team of superhybrids took on the perilous task of venturing to the surface, braving the increasingly hostile conditions to gather crucial data. Each time they returned, their reports grew more dire. "The atmosphere is changing rapidly," Lyria reported, her violet eyes filled with concern. "Even we can't withstand it for long. Whatever's coming, it's going to be beyond anything we've prepared for." In the heart of the complex, Ilara's gestation chambers hummed with life, nurturing the next generation of hybrids. Dennis and Zara worked tirelessly to maintain the ancient systems, pushing themselves to the limits of their enhanced capabilities. As the planet shuddered and groaned around them, the colony stood on the brink of transformation. The cryogenic pods containing the ancient Zen remained unopened, a silent reminder of the planet's mysterious past and the weighty decisions that lay ahead. The clone surveyed the bustling activity of the underground complex, his enhanced mind calculating probabilities and weighing options. As another tremor shook the foundations, he knew that every decision from this point on would be critical. The true test of their adaptability and resilience was about to begin, and the fate of the colony hung in the balance. The clone's enhanced mind raced with possibilities as he processed the latest reports. The tremors were intensifying, and the complex's structural integrity was being tested to its limits. He turned to Dennis and Zara, their faces illuminated by the flickering holographic displays. "Status report," he commanded, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. Dennis's eyes flickered with streams of data as he interfaced with the environmental control system. "Sir, we're losing stability in sectors 3 through 7. The power grid is fluctuating wildly." Zara nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing rapidly. "We're rerouting power to critical areas, but it's a temporary solution at best. The system wasn't designed to handle this level of stress." As if to emphasize their point, another violent tremor shook the complex. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the lights flickered ominously. "Lyria's team is due back any minute," the clone said, his gaze shifting to the airlock. "We need their data to formulate our next move." As if on cue, the airlock hissed open, and Lyria's team stumbled in. Their environmental suits were coated in a layer of strange, iridescent particles, and they carried sealed containers filled with samples. Lyria removed her helmet, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Sir," the surface. "It's changing faster than we ever anticipated. The atmosphere is becoming increasingly toxic, and we're seeing massive geological shifts." She gestured to one of her team members, who carefully opened a container. Inside was a plant unlike anything they had seen before. Its leaves shimmered with a metallic sheen, and its roots seemed to pulse with an inner light. "These are sprouting up everywhere," Lyria explained. "They're thriving in conditions that should be lethal." The clone's mind was already processing the implications when Alara burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "I need to analyze those samples immediately," she said, her eyes fixed on the strange plant. "I have a theory, but I need to confirm it." As Alara whisked the samples away to her lab, another alarm blared through the complex. Dennis's face paled as he interfaced with the system. "Sir, we have a critical situation in the gestation chambers," he reported. "The power fluctuations are threatening the integrity of the hybrid embryos." The clone's decision was instantaneous. "Lyria, take your team and manually regulate the chamber's power supply. It's risky, but those embryos are our future." Lyria nodded grimly, understanding the danger. "We'll do whatever it takes." As Lyria's team rushed to the gestation chambers, Alara's voice crackled over the comm system. "Clone Dennis, you need to see this immediately." They hurried to Alara's lab, where she stood before a holographic display of the plant's genetic structure. Her eyes were wide with wonder. "Look at these markers," she said, highlighting sections of the DNA. "They're similar to the genetic structure we found in the cryogenically preserved Zen specimens." The implications hit them all at once. Dennis was the first to voice it. "Are you saying this planetary event is intentional?" Alara nodded. "I believe it's triggering a pre-programmed evolutionary response in the planet's ecosystem. This could be the key to our survival, but we need more information." The clone's mind raced through the possibilities before coming to a decision he never thought he'd make. "We need to revive one of the Zen specimens. They might have the knowledge we need to survive this event." The process of reviving the chosen Zen specimen was delicate and fraught with tension. They selected a female with physical characteristics similar to Zara, a choice that would prove fortuitous. As the cryogenic pod hissed open, the Zen's eyes fluttered, then opened fully, revealing irises of a deep, mesmerizing purple. "Welcome," the clone said, his voice gentle but firm. "We have much to discuss, and time is of the essence." The Zen, whom they dubbed Zara, too, absorbed the situation with remarkable speed and clarity. Her voice, when she spoke, was melodious and carried an undercurrent of ancient wisdom. "The event you're experiencing is part of our world's design," she explained. "A controlled terraforming cycle meant to reset and evolve our ecosystem. But there is a way to survive it." Zara 2's revelation of a hidden Zen sanctuary deep within the planet's crust sparked a flurry of activity. The clone organized an immediate evacuation, prioritizing essential equipment and the precious gestation chambers. As Dennis and Zara worked with Zara 2 to interface with the ancient Zen technology, creating a safe passage through the increasingly unstable tunnels, the complex shuddered under the strain of the planetary changes. The evacuation was well underway when disaster struck. A violent earthquake rocked the complex, causing a section of the tunnel to collapse. The clone's heart raced as he received the report. Illyria and several of her team were trapped. "Lyria," he called over the comm, "we need your team for a rescue operation. Illyria's trapped in Section B." Lyria's voice came back, strained but determined. "We're on our way." The journey to the Zen sanctuary was a harrowing test of their resilience and adaptability. They faced cave-ins, pockets of toxic gas, and equipment failures that threatened to doom their expedition. Through it all, Zara 2's knowledge proved invaluable, guiding them through hidden passages and helping them bypass ancient security systems. When they finally reached the sanctuary, the sight that greeted them was beyond their wildest imaginations. A vast, self-contained ecosystem spread out before them, powered by the planet's geothermal energy and protected by advanced life support systems. But as they began to settle in, the harsh reality of their situation became clear. The sanctuary's resources, while vast, were finite. They couldn't support the entire colony indefinitely. The clone gathered his leadership team, Dennis, Zara, Lyria, Illyria, and Zara 2, to address this critical issue. "We need to divide our resources," he stated, his tone grave. "The sanctuary will house our most vulnerable and the gestation chambers. The rest of us will attempt to establish a surface outpost." As the plans for the surface expedition took shape, Zara 2 approached Illyria with news that would change everything. "The sanctuary contains a database of our most advanced genetic engineering techniques," she revealed. "With this knowledge, we could create hybrids capable of thriving in the post-event environment." Illyria's eyes lit up with the possibilities. "Show me everything," she said, her mind already racing with the potential applications. As the colony split into two groups, those remaining in the sanctuary and those preparing for the surface mission, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. The gestating hybrid embryos, now safely housed in the sanctuary's advanced facilities, showed signs of accelerated development. Dennis, Zara, and Lyria began assembling their team for the surface expedition, selecting the most resilient and adaptable individuals. Meanwhile, Illyria and Zara 2 immersed themselves in the Zen genetic database, poised to take their hybrid breeding program to unprecedented levels. The clone stood at the threshold between the sanctuary and the tunnel that would lead the surface team back to the transformed world above. He looked at the determined faces of Dennis, Zara, and Lyria, then back at Illyria and Zara 2, already deep in discussion over the genetic data. The final stages of the planetary event loomed ahead, promising challenges beyond anything they had faced so far. Yet, as the clone observed the seamless cooperation between humans, hybrids, and their newfound Zen ally, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had come this far by adapting and evolving. Whatever lay ahead on the transformed surface, they would face it together. Together, their unity would be the key to weathering whatever challenges the transformed planet might present. As the final tremor subsided, the surface expedition team led by Dennis, Zara, and Lyria prepared for their ascent. The air locks hissed open, revealing a world utterly changed from the one they had left behind. Stepping out onto the alien landscape, Dennis's enhanced vision took in the bizarre new flora that stretched as far as the eye could see. Iridescent plants pulsed with an inner light, their metallic leaves shimmering in the dim sunlight that filtered through the thick atmosphere. "Incredible," Zara breathed, her bioluminescence flickering in response to the strange energies surrounding them. "The entire ecosystem has been rewritten." Lyria's team fanned out, their protective suits allowing them to move with caution through the dense undergrowth. Strange creatures scurried away from their approach, a mix of familiar forms and utterly alien anatomies. Let's establish the outpost here, Dennis decided, gesturing to a relatively clear area. We'll need to set up atmospheric monitors and begin collecting samples immediately. As the team worked to construct their base of operations, Zara interfaced with their Zen-enhanced technology, creating a real-time map of the surrounding area. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures about 2 kilometers to the east, she reported. It could be remnants of ancient Zen structures. Meanwhile, deep within the sanctuary, Ilara and Zara, 2 hunched over holographic displays, their eyes darting between genetic sequences and environmental data streaming in from the surface team. Look at this, Ilara said, highlighting a particular genetic marker. If we can integrate this adaptation into our hybrid genome. Zara, too, nodded, her purple eyes gleaming with excitement. Yes, I see it. Combined with our photosynthetic enhancements, we could create beings capable of thriving in this new atmosphere. Days turned into weeks as the 2 groups worked tirelessly. On the surface, Dennis's team expanded their area of exploration, cataloging new species and testing the limits of their protective gear. In the sanctuary, Ilara and Zara, 2 pushed the boundaries of genetic engineering, their efforts fueled by a constant stream of data from above. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Ilara burst into the clone's command center, her face flushed with triumph. We've done it, she announced. The first batch of neo-hybrids is ready for incubation. They'll be adapted to survive and thrive in the new environment. The clone studied the genetic profiles Ilara presented, his enhanced mind quickly grasping the implications. This could be the key to our long-term survival, he mused. How soon can they be ready for surface deployment? The accelerated gestation process should take no more than a few weeks, Ilara replied. We'll need to run extensive tests, of course, but I'm confident in their viability. As the neo-hybrids developed in their gestation chambers, the sanctuary systems detected a significant change on the surface. Seismic activity had all but ceased, and atmospheric toxicity levels were dropping rapidly. The clone made his decision. It's time for the final phase, he announced to his leadership team. We'll send the neo-hybrids to the surface as soon as they're ready. They'll be our vanguard in this new world. When the day finally arrived, the first group of neo-hybrids emerged from their chambers. Led by a charismatic individual named Erix, they possessed an otherworldly beauty that reflected their unique genetic makeup. Erix approached the clone, his iridescent skin shimmering with barely held-back energy. We're ready, he said, his voice resonant with purpose. The surface calls to us. The journey to the surface was a momentous occasion. As the neo-hybrids stepped out into their new home for the first time, the original surface team watched in awe. Erix took a deep breath, his specialized lungs processing the atmosphere with ease. It's more than we ever imagined, Erix said, turning to Dennis and Zara. We can feel the planet's pulse, its very life force. Over the following weeks, the integration of the neo-hybrids into the surface operations exceeded all expectations. Erix demonstrated an uncanny ability to communicate with the new plant life, accelerating the terraforming process beyond their wildest dreams. Dennis and Zara, their biomechanical implants now fully synchronized with the Zen technology, found themselves at the heart of a vast, living network. They coordinated the expanding terraform zones, their enhanced cognitive abilities processing the flood of data from across the planet. Lyria and her team of superhybrids pushed further into the unknown, each expedition bringing back tantalizing clues about the planet's ancient past. They uncovered remnants of Zen cities, each discovery adding another piece to the puzzle of their world's history. As the colony flourished, the distinction between human, Vorta, hybrid, and Zen began to blur. The breeding program that had once been a necessity for survival evolved into a celebration of genetic diversity and adaptability. In the sanctuary, Zara, Tu made a decision that would resonate through the entire colony. She approached Alara with a request that took the geneticists by surprise. "I want to undergo the hybridization process," Zara Tu announced. "It's time to bridge the gap between our past and our future." The procedure was a success, and Zara Tu's transformation became a symbol of unity for the entire colony. As she emerged, her body now a harmony of Zen and hybrid characteristics, she embodied the potential of their new civilization. Years passed, and the colony's success exceeded even the most optimistic projections. The once harsh planet's surface blossomed into a thriving ecosystem, dotted with settlements that showcased the best of their combined technologies and cultures. On the eve of the colony's 20th anniversary, Dennis stood atop a hill overlooking the main settlement. Zara joined him, their hands intertwining as they had countless times before. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Zara asked, her bioluminescence pulsing gently in the twilight. Dennis shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Never in my wildest dreams," he replied. "But I wouldn't change a thing." As they watched the sun set on their transformed world, the first stars began to twinkle in the alien sky. Among them, a new light appeared, the colony's first interstellar ship, embarking on a journey to explore the cosmos and perhaps, one day, reconnect with the Earth that Dennis had left behind so long ago. The launch marked not an ending, but a new beginning. As the ship vanished into the depths of space, Dennis and Zara turned their gaze back to the thriving world before them. Their journey had been extraordinary, but the greatest adventure still lay ahead for them, for their hybrid children, and for the remarkable civilization they had helped to forge among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.